Today we have the privilege of sitting down with James Sexton, a divorce lawyer in New York City. You might be sitting here and thinking, relationship expert and divorce lawyer are polar opposites, but they are not. James has been given unprecedented access to his clients, and in many cases, even more access than a therapist due to the legal ramifications. He has watched relationships demise, and he has gotten to hear the full story from the promising and happy beginnings to the ugly and bitter ends. After working more than 20 years in law, James authored a book in 2019, How to Stay in Love. He has been featured on CNN, ABC, and CBS, in addition to the New York Times, and had a regular segment on Steve Harvey's talk show in 2018 talking about marriage. Just in the past year, James has been featured on the Lex Fridman Podcast, in addition to Soft White Underbelly, and both episodes went viral. The amount of interest in what James has to say is evidence that people are desperately searching for answers when it comes to happy and healthy relationships. We believe that after listening to this conversation, you'll leave more encouraged than you were before and learn some important truths about sex, love, divorce, and conflict. And without further ado, James Sexton. All right, James, how you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
This is probably the shortest commute you've ever had.
This is for sure the shortest commute. I have to tell you, no airports involved. No, and it's also a beautiful day. So just walking from my office, over here for a couple of blocks is delightful. Yeah. So I could do this every day.
Well, for those listening, we've tried to make this happen for a few months now, and so I'm excited that we're finally able to.
Well, you got to see what it's like to be in a relationship of sorts with a divorce lawyer.
Yeah.
Which is everything is subject to change. You know, I have an ex-wife who'll tell you all about it. You know, it's really difficult. You try to plan your day, and emergencies with clients never happen when you want them to happen, and so everyone in your life gets used to the idea that this is all subject to change and vacillate wildly. And, so I appreciate your patience. I wanted to be here, and it's clear you wanted me to get here, and I'm really glad we made it happen, but I'm sorry it's probably like, I'm sorry for moving the schedule number 4,326 of this year alone for me. So.
Yeah, so I mean, we first discovered you through the Lex Fridman podcast, and just when you're on YouTube and you see the thumbnail, like divorce lawyer, there are so many assumptions that go through your mind, and I think in part, like a lot of people probably click on it and they're interested for that reason, but like there are a lot of assumptions that are made. Are they cynical? Are they like, what work are they doing? Like, why would they want to facilitate the end of a marriage? And so all these thoughts, but after listening to so many hours of podcasts from you, I think I've learned like never to judge a book by its cover, obviously, in a sense, but I've also learned more about the profession itself. And I think it's super interesting. I think your kindness, your empathy, and your kind of belief in love is kind of remarkable in itself as a divorce lawyer. And so you've even called yourself a romantic, if I'm correct, and you've seen the movie Love Actually 15 times?
Got to be more than that now. Every time it's on, it's one of those movies that like Goodfellas, or, that if you're flipping through and you see it and you're like, well, I'm in now, and you just stay through it, No, I'm definitely, I think love is everything. It's like our highest calling. It's what we crave. It's, and again, I don't know that has to be romantic love. I think it can be, the love of parent and child. It can be the love between friends. It can be love of God. It can be love of any number of things. And but I think my mother used to say to me that you have to have somewhere to go, something to do, and someone to love. Yeah. And if you're missing any of those three things, you're going to be in pain. Yeah. And so I see in my profession, hurt people hurting people. Yeah. And so for me, that never hurt my faith in love and my personal experience of love. But, as I've said before, I think love is an emotion and love is a verb. Yeah. To feel love and to act with love are very different things.
Oh, so, totally. Yeah. Yeah, and we'll get to this, but James wrote a book, How to Stay in Love, and so I think that's just interesting in itself. But I think that the depiction, the perception of divorce lawyers, obviously is provoked or aided by what we've seen in film, and obviously one of the most recent ones was Marriage Story. And so Laura Dern, she played, I guess it was based on Laura Wasser.
It was based on Laura Wasser. Okay. And anyone who's met Laura will tell you she did a pretty good job.
Yeah. And so 6 Academy Awards, she won for that. But in that movie, completely like ruthless. Like depiction of, and she did a really good job with the character. And so what were your thoughts of like the way that character is depicted and divorce lawyers in general?
Yeah, I think it actually did a pretty good job of depicting what it is we have to do for a living. And I think that she captured someone like Laura's personality. There's a competitiveness to her. She likes to win for her client. Not out of ego gratification, but I think she just likes to do a good job for her clients. I have a lot of respect for Laura and actually all the people at her firm. She's really put together an A-team of lawyers. But I think that, divorce lawyers, we are in a situation where it's like heightened emotions. It is direct conflict. It's intimacy weaponized. It's like all of the things, all the dramatic elements that make for a phenomenal film or TV show, or just something to watch. When you say to someone like, oh, what do you do for a living? I'm an accountant. Like no one goes, oh my God, you must have stories of deductions, But divorce lawyer, people, oh my God, you must have stories. And we do, we have, because we see good people at their worst, and I think there's something fascinating about it. But I thought that film, first of all, I thought that calling it a marriage story felt very dishonest. It's a divorce story. And what it did a good job of, although not the best job I've seen, I will say the best job I've seen was the show on HBO that ran for a short time called Divorce. It was Sarah Jessica Parker and someone else were the leads. And it was really about, but it did a good job of this same thing, and that is showing how perfectly reasonable people who love their children can get into war with each other and devolve into the worst version of themselves. And I thought the acting in it was phenomenal because I think Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson are both very talented people, but I thought they really captured the combination of fury and sadness that you see in clients. And that one scene that became sort of the Oscar moment scene where they get in that screaming fight and he punches the wall, and then it devolves into them both sobbing. To me was like, perfectly acted, but also a perfect capture of something I've seen so many times, which is people who are just hurt, and that comes out as anger, and it that is its manifestation, but something inside them knows like this is hurt, this is tragic, because it's tragic. Like when a marriage ends, it's tragic, and especially a marriage with children. Because you all want to give your children a perfect life, even though you never had one. No one you know has ever had one, but you think your kids are going to be the first ones who have a perfect life, and you want that. And divorce is, you can't possibly pretend that you meant for this to happen. So I get it. I get how it can turn people paranoid and terrified, and that turns people scared, hurt, angry. And then the things that I do as a divorce lawyer, and Laura or any other divorce lawyer does to protect our client, are often misinterpreted as acts of aggression, because it's very hard to simultaneously prevent and prepare for war. So I think this is how people devolve into a kind of madness. And I am here to be paranoid on behalf of a client. So I have to be thinking about remote contingencies. And constantly clients go to me, oh, that's not going to happen. And I go, right, but what if it does? Or, well, Thanksgiving, we'll share that. Okay, what do you mean share it? We'll alternate it. And when you say Thanksgiving, you mean Wednesday through Thursday, or do you mean the whole weekend, Wednesday through Sunday? And what if the prior weekend was your weekend? And they're like, what do we have to worry about this? We're getting along. I'm like, right, we're getting along now. So we should have a rule book just in case down the road we're not getting along. And that's hard for people to understand. And that's why people have the perception that divorce lawyers are stoking the flames between people. But a lot of times we're not stoking the flames for billable hours. I haven't been bored since like Bill Clinton was in office. There's never been the end of the day where I go, I got nothing left to do. I guess I'll just go home. Like at the end of every day, I said to both my sons one's a lawyer and the other's in law school. And I said to them both, like, law school is a pie eating contest where the prize is more pie. Like you're just inundated with horrible amounts of work to eventually be in a profession where you're just inundated with unbelievable amounts of work. And that feeling at the end of the day, like when we finish this and you're like, okay, I've finished the show and now we're done. I never, ever have that feeling in my work. I just at some point go, all right, I can't even see straight. I got to just go home. I got to go home. It'll still be here tomorrow. And I leave and come back the next morning to try to keep pushing with it.
So if let's just say you're at a coffee shop, you order, and then you order coffee, and then you get in a conversation with the barista, and they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" And you're like, "Oh, well, I'm a divorce lawyer." And
I tell them I'm a dolphin trainer.
How do people react to you? What do you say?
So I engage with so many people throughout the day that I really try to avoid small talk. Yeah. I really do. Like if somebody says to me, "What do you do for a living?" I most often would lie or make a joke to sort of duck the question, because I know what the answer will be. If I say I'm a divorce lawyer, it becomes, "Oh my God, you must have some stories." Yeah. That's what everyone says. Yeah. And they don't want to hear normal stories. Like they don't want to hear, "Yeah, there was this couple and they like grew apart, as time passed. And then they decided they were going to divide their assets and come up with a manageable schedule that met their children's needs and made them able to co-parent in a really balanced way. And then I wrote it up in a legally binding fashion." Yeah. Like they would look at me and be like, "That was the worst." They want to hear about, and then he took the chainsaw and he cut the bed in half. And he was like, "You can pick which end of the bed you want now because half is yours." Yeah. Or she was sleeping with his cousin, or he was sleeping with the nanny. Like they want to hear that story. Yeah. And I have to tell you, those are the only people talking about their divorce. Yeah. Like the people who talk about their divorce, I don't blame people for thinking that divorce is like chaos. Because the only people who talk, like I'm divorced, my divorce is the least interesting thing about me. My ex-wife and I get along great. We've raised our children from the ages of 5 and 7 when we divorced to the ages of 24 and 27 now. And we, get along great. She's remarried to a wonderful guy. We're friends. We still talk to each other all the time. And that's a lot of divorces. Yeah. But that's not interesting. Like conflict is interesting. Like all the planes that got to their destination safely today aren't interesting. The one that crashed is the one you want to hear about. And the people who talk about their divorce are people who were wounded by it most often. Yeah. So they want to talk about it because it's defined them in some ways. And it's, it's a way for them to continue to ruminate over it. So it's understandable that people have the perception they have of divorce and of divorce lawyers. But I just think, divorce lawyers, like we don't hasten the demise of marriages. We're not out soliciting business. I say to people, like, I don't make it rain. I sell the umbrella. Like I'm no more facilitating the demise of happy marriages than an oncologist is out there hoping people get cancer. Yeah. That's not how it works. Yeah. Like there's an abundance of cancer. Yeah. Those guys are busy, and I certainly recognize that there are probably a lot of really happy people out there. Yeah. I don't meet them. Yeah. Because I don't. But it's like an oncologist saying like, "Oh my God, everybody I meet has cancer." Right, because you're an oncologist. Yeah. Like everybody I meet's getting divorced because I'm a divorce lawyer. Yeah. So it's normal that I look at relationships and I go, "Wow, like this is not great." Yeah. But I'm sure there are a lot of really happy people out there somewhere.
Yeah. When I think about look at the trajectory of your career, especially when it comes to the media end, obviously you've been a prominent divorce lawyer in New York City for quite some time, but
25 years.
Yeah. And so, and in I think 2018 or for a while you were regular on Steve Harvey's show. Yep. And did a lot of media then. Obviously there was COVID that happened in the middle of all this stuff, but it seemed like there's like a ton of renewed interest in the work you're doing and in your appearances. It seems honestly like you're everywhere when it comes to podcasts, big podcasts. Do you feel like that's true in terms of like the uptake of interest? And do you feel that? And why do you feel like that is, if that's the case?
Yeah, I think it, so the book came out and there was a lot of media opportunities that came with it, many of which I turned down. Like this is a hobby. Yeah. Like I've not made a penny on any of this. And if I sell a book, like I think I get like 10 cents for each book that's sold. My publisher, my literary agent, they keep most of it. Yeah. And good for them. This was always like a labor of love for me. And I'm very blessed. Divorce lawyers still make a good living. Yeah. But yeah, there was a big uptick. After the book came out and I did the press that I did for that, which was somewhat selective, it kind of died down. COVID happened. I still did Access Hollywood. I did a lot of commentary for them on celebrity divorces. I did Steve Harvey for like 13 episodes. That was fun. But I didn't do much beyond that. I was offered a lot of things and I just wasn't really interested in it because I really do love my day job. Yeah. Like even today, like since 4:30 a.m. I've been working as a divorce lawyer, and then about half an hour before I came over here. So I still find the time to be doing the job that is my passion. But when I got a call from Mark Liotta from White Underbelly, that was about 6-7 months ago. And I was a fan of that channel. I've enjoyed watching his interviews. I think there's a radical kind of empathy that he's trying to create in people that I think is really beautifully done. You know, getting to know like human emotional complexity of people struggling with substance use disorder or living alternative lifestyles. And my assistant came in and said, there's a guy on the phone named Mark from something called Soft Belly or Soft, and I was like, Soft White Underbelly? And he said, yeah. I said, wow, that's weird. Like, okay, you know. And I picked it up, and I hear on the other end of the phone, like the voice I've heard in those interviews. Yeah. And I said, you know, hi, you know, what's this about? And he said, well, I'd love to interview him. I'm coming to New York. And I said, you know, I'm not a heroin addict, right? Like, I'm not a sex worker. Like, I'm a divorce lawyer. And he's like, yeah, I've heard you speak, and I think it would be interesting. So I didn't really take it that seriously. I rode my scooter, actually, like my kick scooter, from my apartment to the W Hotel where he was shooting it. And we just shot for an hour and a half. And that video that you see is like just me going in and just riffing. Yeah. And, you know, I think he caught me at like a perfectly amount caffeinated, perfectly like amount kind of exhausted. So I was feeling very blunt. Yeah. And he captured, you know, a really good interview. And after it, he sent me a text the next day and said, I've done thousands of interviews, and that was possibly the best, if not one of the best I've ever done. Wow. And I thought, well, you know, I bet you say that to all the boys. Like, well, you know, that's like a thing you say. You know? And then a few days later, he sent another message, and he said, I just rewatched it, and it's just, this is going to get 4 million views. And I thought, that's crazy. There's no way anyone would find this that interesting. That many people would find this that interesting. And it went up, and within, I think, 48 hours, it had like 1.5 million views. And now it's up to like 5.3 million. Wow. And that started the ball rolling on a lot of things. Yeah. And apparently Lex Fridman saw it and was referred to it by a few other people that saw it. And I was actually taking the subway from Manhattan to Queens to go on a trial in Queens Supreme Court on a domestic violence case. And I was listening to Lex Fridman talking to Andrew Huberman. And I get off the subway and I refreshed my email, and there's an email from Lex Fridman. And he said, hi, you know, my name's Lex Fridman. I have a podcast. And I was like, is this a joke? Like, I was just listening to his podcast. Like, I'm a fan of his. Yeah. And he said, you know, I'd really love to have you on. And that was how it went. And that's had, you know, millions of, I think 4.5, 5 million views. And it's been clipped up a lot, and that's all over TikTok and other places. And that opened a lot of doors, many of which I try to do as many as I can while still maintaining the demands of my day job. But yeah, it's been really exciting and interesting. I think it's given people a lot of insight into the type of work that divorce lawyers do, although I don't know that I'm a typical divorce lawyer. Yeah. So, and it's given people some insight into my viewpoint, which I never realized was as interesting to people as it turned out to be. So.
Well, I think that framing of the conversation, your background is important because you wrote in your book that when it comes to relationships, there are basic truths that can't be contradicted. I just love that line because I think that's a fact, and I think it's really important for people to hear. And so I'd imagine whoever's listening right now, there's probably 3 categories of people. Obviously, there are people that are looking to potentially get married in the future or not. Mm-hmm. There are those who are currently married and worry if divorce is in their future, or maybe even contemplating a divorce. And then those are those people who have already gotten divorced. And so I think after reading your book, seeing your interviews, like you just beautifully are able to, and uniquely able to speak into all these stages of the relationship. And so I think obviously the people who are considering getting married or are married, you're the guy that they hope they never meet in some sense. And for those that are divorced, I think that you have one of the most healthy and really, really great perspectives I've ever seen. What it means to co-parent, to move forward with your spouse. So I want to get into that because if you get divorced, your life is not over. And I think some people feel that way. They feel the shame. They feel like, I'm damaged goods. So how many marriages have you worked on at this point?
Thousands. 25 years. I mean, it's a long time to do the work I've done. And yeah, I would say in the thousands. I've never really thought about the numbers, but there was a time where, my practice now is fewer clients, but with greater resources or more complex issues. So I just finished like a 13-day trial in Manhattan on a very complicated matter. And I'm a little more selective about who I work with. But there was a time, early in my career where I just, anybody who was getting divorced, like the cop and the teacher, like I would just do their divorce. So I was more of a volume practice at that point. At one point, about a decade ago, I had 7 lawyers working for me, and I was kind of the face of the firm, and people would come in and they'd hire the firm based on me, and then I would hand them off to one of my people. And I grew tired of that model very quickly because it felt very dishonest. Like they were signing on to work with me, and they were getting very good people. The people who worked for me, I have a good eye for talent. But I didn't like that model. And I helped all of those people find new jobs with colleagues. Now I have cases against all of them. But we're still all friends. I'm friends with all my exes, professionally and personally. And I'm it's been a lot of people. I can't say I represented one type of person over another. Like a lot of men, a lot of women. I've represented the victims of intimate partner abuse and domestic violence, and I've represented the perpetrators. I've represented people married to people with substance use disorder or mental health issues, and I've represented people who have substance use disorder, mental health issues. So I've really been, the cheater and the cheated on. Yeah. I've been on all sides of all of these cases.
Yeah, I mean, I think you alluded or you said this in your book, but you get to analyze marriage from so many different angles. Yeah. And in so some ways you are in a more privileged position than even like a therapist or something like that. And so you wrote in your book that you see the psychological, emotional, the sexual, the financial, the parental, and the practical, and the logistical. And so can you take us into that process a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think, what I tell people is that a trial divorce lawyer, our job is full contact storytelling, basically. Like my job is to tell your story. And it's not about lying, because lying is dangerous to do in court. And facts have a way of coming out, sometimes despite my best efforts, but facts have a way of coming out. So it's not about lying as much as like makeup isn't lying. Makeup is about accentuating the positive, decentuating the negative. And that's really a lawyer's job in a divorce, is to accentuate the things that support your client's position and their stated goals and decentuate the things that don't, right? So there's what I would call a positive case and a negative case. And both sides are trying to like build their positive case and take down the other side's positive case with their negative case. So it's like a chess match, or it's like a war of sorts, And so for me, think that getting in the head both of my client and of the other side, and thinking about all of the best and worst arguments for my client and all of the best and worst arguments for the other side, is the key to doing well at this. Yeah. Those are the ingredients, So to do that, you have to practice a very radical kind of empathy, because you have to really put yourself in like the head of your client from a positive place and a negative place, and vice versa on the other side. Yeah. And so I think that just forces you to see that, you can be a great husband and a terrible father, or a great father and a terrible husband. And, you can be someone who's great in one sphere of life and just totally inept in another. And, I also think we change too as people, as life changes us. Yeah. And so I've seen people that like started out as a phenomenal spouse or started out as a phenomenal parent, and then something happens, they lose a parent, they go through some tragedy or loss or trauma, and it scars them, and they have a really hard time with it, or they have some political or religious transformation that occurs in their life, and it changes the fundamental dynamics of what they're doing, or they have a drug or alcohol issue, or they give up a drug or alcohol issue, or they lose their job, and it changes their definition of themselves. And so a lot of what I do is trying to like, what's the best explanation and the worst explanation for each of these things? And to do that, you really have to like look at it from every possible angle, because you never know which angle the judge is going to look at it from. So I think that forces you to see interpersonal conflicts in a very different way.
Yeah. Well, that skill in itself is something I feel like our culture really needs to learn with many different topics. And so something like religion or whatever, it's like, how can you see perspectives from all around? And so like sometimes we're so short-sighted and we only see like one part of the story. And then we don't see this other aspect of this person. But what I find so fascinating about reading your book is like, even the ugliest stuff, it's like you're not hurting anyone but yourself if you don't tell me like what has actually happened or what you did. And then that comes out later, and then they tell you, and like, what the heck, you didn't tell me that you did this.
But there's so much shame. You know, I get it. Like, I get it both as a lawyer who's been doing this a long time, and I get it as a human being. Like, there's things we just don't want to even look at. Like, we're so angry at ourselves. Like, shame versus embarrassment. Embarrassment is like, oh, I feel badly, I did this. Shame is, I'm bad because I did this. Like, I'm a bad person, And as I said before, like, I think that, if I don't know that I believe in the devil, but I think if there is a devil, the principal function of the devil would be to convince us that we're bestial and that God couldn't love us. So it doesn't matter. Do whatever you want to do, because nothing matters. Nothing means anything. There is no good. There is no bad. There's just what you can get away with and what feels good. And everything in our culture, I think, steers people towards that. Sensory pleasure, like the pursuit of the immediate gratification, like to trading, what you want most for what you want now. And I get it. Like, that sells stuff. That's going to sell the most products. That's going to sell the most clothes and bags and watches and cars, But I think people realize the limitations of that very quickly, but they're just still so ashamed of it because they don't have a good excuse. Like, why did you do this thing? Like, why did you? Like, I've sat in a room across a table from so many people that cheated on their spouse. And you can't possibly pretend that cheating on your spouse isn't a universal problem. Like, if you believe the Bible, like, God gave us 10 commandments. Like, that was it. And 2 of them were don't sleep with people you're not married to. Like, thou shalt not kill got 1. But don't commit adultery and don't covet your neighbor's wife. Like, it was as if God was saying, like, the rules of Fight Club. Like, it was like, don't, listen, honor the Sabbath, honor your mother and father, don't cheat on your spouse. Seriously, don't cheat on your spouse. Like, these are big issues for thousands of years people have been dealing with. And yet people just go, oh my God, I'm the worst piece of human garbage because I did this thing. And you go, you did this thing that millions of people have done? And I'm not forgiving it. It's not for me to forgive, but wait a minute. Like, you think you're a horrible person because you did this utterly human thing? This unbelievably awful but understandable thing. Like, you took a temptation that millions of people have taken from all walks of society, and I'm not giving them a pass, but I'm just saying, wait, to start hating yourself and convincing yourself that you're a bad person and that you don't even need to try to be good because now you've just completely screwed it up, like, that feels so I try to say to people from the beginning, like, look, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to protect you. And so just tell me the truth. Like, the 2 people you should never lie to are your doctor and your lawyer. Our only job's to protect you, and confidentiality applies. So just tell us the truth. But people still don't tell us the truth because they're lying to themselves.
Yeah. I mean, what I've learned over the past few years is that, man, there's just such a complexity to human beings.
And yet a simplicity. Like
complexity and the simplicity.
The simplicity is that, like, we want to be loved, we want to be praised, we want people to like respect us and stroke our head and make us feel better. We want sex, we want physical affection. Like, these are really normal human things, know? And yet it's so complicated. Like, it's so such simplicity, and it's so complicated.
Yeah, and in a sense, nothing really surprises me anymore. I mean, if you're like shocked by somebody's actions, it's like, well, I think anybody under any set of circumstances could really do anything, really. And so I think what's interesting about the complexity, right? I would say from after, studying the subject, looking at your work, I would say that marriage is inevitable in a sense. And so what I find to be one of the most fascinating, it's kind of like a bizarre tug of war in us, right? So particularly millennials and Generation Z, we're like terrified of marriage. We're like avoiding it at all costs. We'll talk about attachment theory later, but like avoidant attachment, all of that stuff. It's like, I do not want to, and that might be why someone's listening to this right now. It's like, I don't want to end up in a divorce or something like that. But on the other end, we're like drawn to it. And that's the inevitable part. And so Helen Fisher, she's like a famous anthropologist, studied human relationships throughout history. She wrote in one of her books, she said, pair bonding is the hallmark of the human animal. Monogamy is the rule. Human beings almost never have to be cajoled into pairing. Instead, we do this naturally. We flirt, we court, we fall in love, we marry, and the vast majority of us marry only one person at a time. And so after reading that and reading her book, I was like, it's almost like in our biology, in a sense, to be drawn to getting married. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the monogamous model of marriage and pair bonding is, I think, the most compatible with our biology. So if you're the kind of person that approaches the world from a place of like natural law, or that we should be forming our societal structures around that. Like if you read Freud, Civilization and its Discontents and, things like that they basically talk about, look, we have to, as a society, to build a civilization, you have to suppress some of your drives. We can't have an ordered society if you're allowed to act violently towards, anytime you feel violent towards someone or have sex with anyone who you find romantically attractive. Your biology is designed to find people attractive and to find them sexually stimulating so our species can continue. And we're similarly, we have drives towards sweet foods. Why? Because our body is like, hey, we don't know when we're going to get food again, so let's eat this high calorie thing and make it appealing to us. So like these are all very normal, natural drives in a very, abnormal world that we've built. Like we didn't build the world to complement natural human drives. We live now in a society where I think advertising is the most prevalent force in culture, I think, is advertising. Advertising is the opposite of therapy. It's the opposite of therapy. Like if the goal of therapy is to have a person feel some sense of peace and contentment in their heart. You're okay. You're fine. It's going to be fine. Advertising is the opposite. Advertising is, you're not okay. You're not like this, not okay. But guess what? There's a solution. There's a solution. We got the fix here. You got to just sign up for this workshop or buy this bag or buy this shirt or wear these glasses or drink the right alcohol, whatever it is. But you're not okay. That's the message. And so we've, millennials, Gen Z, like you've grown up in a media-soaked environment that I couldn't have even imagined when I was in my 20s, right? There was no internet. There was not only internet, but like everywhere you go, you are inundated with marketing messages. And fundamentally, they all say the same thing. You're not okay. You could be if you could afford this, this, or this, but you're not okay. And so, and at the same time, the proliferation of social media has made this performative sense of how well everyone else is doing compared to you. You're watching everyone's greatest hits and living your gag reel. And so I think it's just a toxic combination, and it's created a tremendous, I don't want to say FOMO, but like a fear that everything you're doing, there is definitely someone who'll tell you you're doing it wrong and that you could have done it different or better. And so I think marriage, which is a tremendous commitment, like we're going to do a seemingly impossible thing, like love only each other and be satisfied loving only each other for forever, for an unfathomable amount of time. Like, that's huge. So like people have a hard time committing to cell phone contracts. So because they're like, there might be a better one coming. And what if there's like a better model of phone? Like you think those people are going to sign up for life, for marriage, and without any trepidation whatsoever? You guys live in a generation where you watch how many technologies radically transform. Like completely change the way our society, like somebody thought, why do taxis exist? Like, why couldn't you just like share cars with anybody you want to and maybe have like a way to like let it, like that's incredible. And now it's just, that's just a thing. You guys saw that happen in your lifetime. Like, that's amazing. But why would that person be skeptical about saying, I'm signing on for this person for the rest of my life, no matter what? And by the way, I've watched my parents or grandparents or half the people I know suffer the unbelievable pain that comes with a divorce. Like, I get it. I get the fear. But again, bravery is when you're scared and do it anyway.
But I think you're speaking the tug of war, and so I pulled a bunch of statistics, and so the inevitability of marriage, like you might be feeling that, but 90% of people have had a first marriage by age 50.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
That's okay. So it's like, if you are listening to this right now, 9 out of 10 of you will be married by like age 50.
Well, you will have been married.
Yeah.
At some point.
Yeah.
By the time
you
won't still be married necessarily.
And so it's like, we do this, and then, the other quote from Fisher, she said, the human animal seems to be cursed with a contradiction of the spirit. We search for true love, find him or her, and settle in. Then, if the spell begins to fade and the mind begins to wonder, monogamy and adultery are a fair. And so it's like this tug of war of like, we have now, conquered this thing, got this thing, we finally got the person. And then it's like, like you get divorced, there's problems, there's all these challenges that you are now facing. And so are you sensing, even with your practice, like, are you seeing millennials and Generation Z hitting you? I mean, Generation Z is under 27 at this point.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of prenups for Gen Z, and for even like Alpha is sort of starting. Like I see a lot of prenups. I have to tell you, I've never seen the number of, in the last 5 years, the number of people ages 25 to 35 who are coming in for prenups has 10x'd. And that's just not just me, that's my colleagues. Like, prenups are a thing now in a way they weren't before. They're still not publicly discussed. Like, there's still this compulsion to pretend you don't have a prenup, or to like minimize awareness of it. Like, you never see people on Instagram being like, sign in the prenup. Like, they do everything. Like, here's the cake, here's the dress, here's the shoes, here's the whatever. They're not like, hey, we're doing our prenup. They hide it. Like, I've done prenups for a number of celebrities and entertainers and athletes, and then I've seen them on TV talking about, oh yeah, we didn't have a prenup, we're not gonna have a prenup. And I'm like, you do, because it's in my safe. Like, I know you have a prenup, but why are you lying to people about that? And it's not filed anywhere. It's not something that's recorded anywhere. So there's no way to know until they get divorced, and then it's often a sealed record. So I think this is, there is, like the quote that you gave there is an unbelievable tension between our desire to be married, right? Our desire to find the one and to feel like deeply connected to a person, and also all of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, that the flesh is heir to. I think that's for a human struggle. But we have a diversity of potential mating options that no one had before. Yeah. Like, your grandfather in a week didn't interact visually or mentally with as many women as you interact with in a day if you have Instagram.
And inundated with so many possibilities.
Right, just inundated. And it's easier than ever to spark connection with those people. Yeah. Because like, if you listen to like Stevie Wonder's song Part-Time Lover, which was about like a guy having an affair, it's quaint. Because it's like, call up, ring once, hang up the phone to let me know you made it home. Now it would just be like, yeah, send me a text. Let me know you got in. And then you're just sitting next to your spouse, like cheating. Yeah. But they don't know. What are you doing? Oh, I'm looking up that restaurant we're going to this weekend. Yeah. Like, oh, I'm texting my brother. Like, there's no, like, it's so easy now. Yeah. And it's so easy to start inappropriate conversations, and give yourself into an environment that will be filled with temptation. Yeah. That, by the way, you're human. Like, it's not going to work. Like, I'm someone who's always trying to eat healthy, especially as I'm getting older. I try to like maintain a healthy weight and things like that. I've learned it's a lot easier to control my food environment than my brain. Mm. So if I just don't have potato chips, I won't eat potato chips. Yeah. But it's a big ask to say you're going to have them, but just don't eat them. Yeah. Like, no, they're going to call me. Yeah. Like, they're going to, and I'm humble enough to acknowledge they're stronger than me. Yeah. So I just don't have them. Yeah. Because by the time I put on my shoes and go out the door and walk to the Whole Foods to get the potato, like, I'm not going to do all that to get potato chips. Yeah. But if they're just within my reach, like if cheating requires a really complex, a lot of people might do it, but if all it is like, we're talking to people that we kind of have no business talking to, but they're interested in us. See, that's the other thing. Like, part of what you just talked about there is this reality of the way we connect so deeply with a romantic partner, and then the way that we're ingrained by society to start just treating them like garbage. Yeah. Like, and the analogy I always say to people about this, because they'll say like, well, yeah, but how do you stay like madly in love with somebody, you know, excited about them? Like, you've been together for 10 years. Like, okay, I have a dog who's 13 years old. I have never once come home and looked at that dog and went, I got to get a puppy. Like, this dog, I have 13 years.
Yeah.
Like, how many years am I supposed to pet this dog?
Yeah.
Like, I want to get a cool young dog who's like fun and I can play ball with.
Yeah.
Like, that's my dog. Like, I love that dog. Like, I love that dog more every day because I love that dog. Like, I don't look at my sons and go like, oh, like they were so cool when they were teenagers. They were so much fun. Now they're like adults. Like, I never thought, like, every day I find something new about them that's like cool and exciting, and some part of them goes away and some part of them appears, and like, it's wonderful. And so I don't know why we do that. Like, why does romantic love turn into like, and I think I have the answer, and the answer is that our culture is doing that. Our culture, like every TV show, the wife is rolling her eyes at the husband, like, oh, this idiot I'm married to. And the guy is like, oh, there's the most loathsome harpy ever to castrate a man, and she's not sleeping with him anymore. And this is acceptable behavior. Yeah. And that's crazy. Like, that's crazy. Like, this should be your primary relationship. This should be your biggest cheerleader. This should be the person that you're rooting for. Like, this should be the way, like, love your spouse a quarter of as much as you love your dog. Try that. Yeah. Try that. Like, try to approach it from that place and see what that does for you, and see what it does for the way they treat you. Yeah. Because it's partly this weird death spiral that people get into. Of like, well, he's not being nice to me, so why should I be nice to him? It's like, okay, that's great. Yeah, that'll definitely work. I'm sure if you start being cold to him, he's going to start being really loving to you. That's really how that works, right? Said no one ever. Like, how it really works is just keep being kind, keep being nice, keep being attentive. And maybe if anything's going to change this other person, it's that kindness. You know, we've all seen so many examples of this, you know, where like you're in this tense moment and then you like say or do something kind, and then it sort of, everybody starts doing like, oh, well, all right, it's softened the mood, and everybody's mood sort of softens. And like why don't we apply that to this relationship that's the most important relationship with another human being we're probably going to have? It's the one from which our children are born. It's the one that is theoretically supposed to last the longest. When the children have moved away, this is still there.
So interesting. I read Esther Perel's book, The State of Affairs.
Yeah, it's a great book.
And she talks about this in the sense that, like, over the past, 50, 60 years, we have now put these expectations on the other person that had never existed throughout the rest of society. So you're wanting them to do all these things, and we don't have the same expectation on our dog.
There's a tremendous overlap in my perspective and Esther Perel's. We were on a panel once together some years ago that was sponsored by Lifehacker. And I find her work fascinating. Yeah. And I feel like if anybody could put me out of business, it would be her, because she really has this very radical view. Because what I think she's done in her work that I really respect is she's separating the wheat from the shaft, right? Like, she's looking at it and saying, you know, because to some degree, tradition is peer pressure exerted by dead people. Yeah. So I think that she's looking at it the way that like Gen Z and millennials look at things, which is, right, but why do we do it that way? Yeah. Like, what would it look like if it was easier?
It's like, why?
You know,
the why question, yeah.
Right. And I kind of love that she does that. Like, why do we do it that way? Like, why is monogamy an essential element, you know? And that is a very interesting question. And I think she's asking really interesting questions. And I'm much more interested when people ask interesting questions than when they purport to offer me answers.
Yeah. So the divorce rate currently for, I guess, first marriage is what, 50%? Higher? It's
a little higher than that.
Okay.
Depending on who you ask.
Now, 50% get divorced, but then I heard you say in another interview, 84% of those people get remarried.
86% get remarried within 5 years of their divorce.
Okay, so it's like...
So it's not only do 86% of people who've now been through the horror of a divorce, even the friendliest one is a terrible disruption.
But now we're doing it all over again.
They're going to do it again. Let's do it. We're in.
And so it's like, you know, you see this...
Within 5 years.
Yeah, you see this contradiction of the spirit again and again and again. And so is it true that divorce rates for a second marriage are higher than 66%?
Yep.
And then third marriage, 75%.
Yeah, it's even higher.
What is happening? You would think
you're bad at it.
No, you feel like you're getting better at it. Like you're like, okay, I failed once.
No, it teaches it statistically it shows the opposite, which is that you're not good at it, and the chances of you getting better at it go down. So, and I've had clients. I have a client who's on his 5th divorce right now, and I've done his last 3 prenups. Yeah. And he keeps getting married. And I there's a part of me that wants to say to him, why are you doing it? Like, you're bad at this. Yeah. You're just bad at being married. Like you're like Taylor Swift. Like the common denominator is you. Yeah. You know, you are, it cannot just be that it's all their fault and they all did you wrong. Like you are the most common denominator, or you're just terrible at picking partners. Yeah. But like in either of those scenarios, you have some culpability, if not all of the culpability. So but again, like I get it. I get why people keep trying, because I think we fall in love so fast. And like I just today did a consult for a client who I previously did his divorce, and he met a woman in December. And now I'm doing the prenup for him because he's marrying her.
Like 2 months, like 3 months later, 4 months later.
Yeah, it's like 4 months later.
Yeah.
And they're getting married in May.
Yeah.
And I just, you know, and he said, yeah, but this is like, you have no idea. Like how we feel about each other is just, it's like nothing I've ever experienced. And he is
like a spell.
And he is telling me the truth.
Yeah.
Like he is telling me the truth. And any of us who've ever felt it, like if you've ever fallen in love, like, of course you know what he means. Like I know what he means. Like I tell you, I have had that. I've had that kiss. I've had that walk down a city street where you forget how many blocks you've even gone because there's just nothing in the world but this person. Like, and I love that. I think that's the best thing. Like when I'm an old man and I'm in my deathbed, I'm going to remember like 4 or 5 of those moments. Yeah. Because they're as good as it gets. Like but you know, like I always quote a Joseph Brodsky poem that I like, and the quote is, I wish I knew no astronomy when the stars appear. Yeah. And I feel like doing what I do for a living, I see with an undeniable clarity how we can go from so in love to just so not. Yeah. And how much pain can get born of it. But I still, man, you know, like everything, we're playing a game you can't win. Yeah. To the utmost. Like you're gonna die. Yeah. I'm gonna die. Everyone you love's gonna die. Everyone I love's gonna die. We know that from the beginning. It's kind of the only thing we know. Yeah. Like everything else is up for possibility, but you're definitely gonna die, and I'm definitely gonna die, and everyone we love's gonna die. Yeah. And so, do you just go, well, there's good reason to just tap out of this whole thing, or do you go, okay, but like I can either ignore that, which I don't think is the solution, or I can ruminate over it, which is probably not the solution. Or I can let it inform my day-to-day life and remind me that like there's something more important than all of this noise and all these things, because there's this inevitability. And so I think that it's the same thing with love. Like you fall madly in love and you go, this is the greatest feeling in the world. It's like someone who shot heroin for the first time.
Like high,
there's got to be something to it. I've never done crack, it, but man, there's got to be something to it. People love it. Yeah. So it's got to feel great. But you have to remind yourself that, okay, yeah, I feel this thing, but it may not be like, you know, it may be the siren song and the rocks are there.
It lasts for 18 months. So,
yeah, it could be. Yeah. But you know what? It might be in 18 months that made it worth it. Yeah. And the reason I wrote my books and the thesis, if you're looking at the practical aspect of my work, is that I think that we fall in love really fast and then we fall out of love slowly. Yeah. So slowly that it's like gaining weight. You don't even realize it's happening, and then one day your pants don't fit. Yeah. And like only then do you go like, what, did they shrink my pants? And meanwhile you
don't even notice.
You don't even notice. And then and that's why, like, if you've ever seen someone who like gained a bunch of weight, but you saw them every day, like you don't notice that they gained any weight. Yeah. And then someone sees them who hasn't seen them in 6 months, who goes, oh my God, did you see? Looks so different. And then you look at a picture and you're like, oh yeah, I guess it's really different. But you didn't know. Like, I think we fall in love so fast. It's like getting shot out of a cannon, and it's so intense and so amazing. And then we slowly disconnect, and it starts to, and then we turn around and we're like, wait, how did we get here?
Well, given these statistics, obviously people are naturally curious about what leads to divorce, obviously because they're afraid of it. But, You have a brilliant story about granola and blowjobs. And so
I get to say blowjobs on it.
So
great.
tell me
exciting.
about that. Yeah.
Blowjobs and granola.
Yeah.
Well, so you've almost submarined the punchline, but so I had a client, a young woman, beautiful woman, 2 kids, married to a very successful guy in finance. And they had a very successful marriage, and then the marriage ended, and it ended because he'd had an affair, but they had been sort of, growing apart or whatever. And we were going through this very contentious, ugly trial, and we were sitting outside of the courthouse or courtroom one day after a lunch break, about to go back in and do more testimony. And we just were making small talk with each other because you get to know a client really well. You see their dirty laundry. You've been a lot of miles with them. Like many of my clients, I get invited to their next wedding, or I go to the bris of their kid or whatever it might be. But I stay in touch with people. And I was chatting with her, and I said, was there a moment when you knew your marriage was over? And she said, oh yeah, absolutely. And I said, really? Like what was it? And she said, well, this is going to sound weird, but there was this granola that I really liked. Yeah. And they only sold it at Whole Foods. And she said, my husband used to always get it for me. And I never had to ask. She was like, I would just open my because she'd had the same thing for, she was very very intense person, a corporate person as well. And she had rituals. And one of them was that she would have yogurt with this granola every morning. Yeah. And she said it would just, one day, I'd be running out of it, and the next day, I would just open the cabinet and there'd be a full one there. And she said it always made me smile to myself because I never had to ask. He never took credit for it. He never said oh, did you see? I got your granola. He never wanted a reward for it. It was just this little thing that he did that made her feel seen and made her feel important. Yeah. And I don't know, it just was, he was anticipating her needs and getting in front of them without her having to ask in the way that we feel sort of humiliated when we ask for something. And she said, one day I opened the cabinet and the granola bag was empty. She said, and I thought, oh, that's weird. That's never happened before. She said, so I left it there because I thought, oh, he hasn't noticed. And when he notices, he's gonna get more of the granola. And she said, and he never did. She said, and I remembered taking the bag out after a certain amount of time and throwing it in the trash. And I thought, I think this thing might be over. Yeah. And I remember hearing that story, and she said it with such sincerity. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that's the saddest story involving granola I've ever heard. Yeah. And I said to her, was there anything like that you did for him? And with no hesitation, she said, yeah, blowjobs. And I spit my espresso. I actually, it was something you do in a film, because I was not expecting that. Yeah. And I spit espresso. I remember it it was yesterday. And I said, really? And she said, yeah. She said, I don't know. She said, when we were dating and we were first married, I gave him blowjobs all the time, a couple times a week. Yeah. She's because it took 3 minutes. Sometimes less if I was more performative, sometimes more if I was a little lackadaisical. But it was it was this little thing I would do. And then all day he was in a great mood. He would send me text messages oh, this morning was so hot. It just made him so happy. Yeah. She's and then the kids were born. She's and I never made a decision oh, I'm not giving him blowjobs anymore. She said, but it's just life got in the way. She's I don't know, we would be in the morning, the kids would be getting ready, whatever, and I would just be oh, well, now is what I normally would have, real quick in the bathroom, you know. She's and then I would be oh, no, we'll wait until tonight, and then we'll have sex, and we both get to enjoy it, and that'll be even more fun, and, and she said, and then, I realized, oh, yeah, it'd been, 3 weeks since I gave, and then it became, oh, it was months since I gave him a blowjob, and she's I think that, I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, the granola or the blowjob, which one stopped first? I don't know, but... And I'm not saying those are equivalent things. It's probably much easier to buy granola than to give a blowjob. I've never given one. But I will say that I think these are acts of affection and love. Yeah. They're low percentage. Again, it doesn't, I'm not saying that this isn't something worthy of respect, but it doesn't take that long to do either of those things. Yeah. And if the goal is for my spouse to feel loved, cared for, excited about me, excited about how I feel about them, inspired to want to radiate love back to me, like, I don't know, it feels like a pretty good investment. You know, like if I said to a guy like, dude, you got to buy granola like once every 3 weeks to have a happy marriage, they'd be like, what's the punchline here? Like, that's the easiest thing in the world, you know? It's like when you say to people, you know, what if I told you there was a drug that makes you sleep better, have sex better, will improve your overall health, and will keep your weight under control? People will be like, I'll take it. I'd be like, great, it's called exercise. It takes 20 minutes a day to swallow it. Go do it. You know, and that's like, honestly, like a variant of that is what you would say in this situation, which is like, yeah, takes about 3 minutes, you know, so you got to decide, like, are you willing to make that commitment? And have you told a newlywed person, listen, man, there's going to be some tough times ahead. There's going to come a time where you're going to have to buy granola. You're going to have to actually look in the cabinet and try to remember when you get to the store to get her granola. Like, the person would laugh at you and go, dude, I would do that for her. Or you said to a woman, like, you're going to have to put his penis in your mouth. Like, we're dating, of course. Like, we do that all the time. We're throwing the kitchen sink at each other. We're trying to impress each other. Like, we're trying to, the thrill, the other person's pleasure gives you.
Yeah, it gives you a high. Yeah,
it's a high when you're first dating. Like, you want to do everything to make this person feel good, you know? So why does that go away? Why do we let that go away? Why do we let go of it like that? Yeah. We had it. Why would we let go of it?
Well, I think the answer is in what you said earlier, which is that love is a feeling and it's also a verb. And so when something stops serving us in terms of a high that we're receiving, like you're getting a dopamine blast from going and buying granola for someone because you're so in love with them, and then that feeling is now not immediately coming to you.
I don't know, though. I have to tell you, I got to push back on that, because I think the dopamine blast is a function of the way that, like, I think it's I don't think it's as like if then as that, because I think what poisons us is we shift our mindset, and that's what robs us of the dopamine. Yeah. Like, it's no longer, look what I can do. Look at the power I have to make this person feel so good in this awful world sometimes, right? Like, I give this person joy. Maybe this is the best 3 minutes of their day. Yeah. I hope it is, you know, and this is great. And like, I can help them do this. And maybe then it inspires them to want to help me. We shift our mindset from that to, I don't owe you granola. I don't owe you a blowjob. Yeah. And you know what? You're absolutely right. You don't owe your spouse anything, really. Yeah. But you signed up for something here. And I thought it was, we were going to try to like make it good for each other. We were going to try to like have it work and have it be good, you know? And so don't sell me. That's the problem I have with marriage in our culture at the moment. Yeah. And that's why I think I've been embraced by like the red pill manosphere space, like the people that sort of are like, yeah, marriage is a scam. Yeah. Because it is, if it's a bait and switch. Yeah. If it's, I'm going to inundate you with granola and blowjobs to get you to sign up for a thing. And then once you've signed up for it and locked in, I'm going to take out all of that stuff. And the stuff I get from you, the law will force you to continue to give me even after we split up. But the stuff you got from it, affection, attention, sex, all those things, court can't force me to do any of that. So I think a lot of women sign on for protector, provider, you know, help with the children, help support the children financially, help support me financially. And men sign on for have sex with me, be nice to me, be sweet to me, be kind to me. Yeah. Well, only one side of that equation is enforceable by court order. Yeah. So I understand why there's a perception that there's an imbalance of power. In the law, we call it a contract of adhesion. Yeah. It's when two people are in unequal bargaining positions and entering into a contract. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've said that divorce is a progression and a series of events. So it happens slowly and then all at once. Mm-hmm. So that kind of means that as you're in this entire process, if you are married, like that means you have little moments to fix it and turn around. And what I find to be so powerful that is, I have a very, very high view of science, and we have a very high view of science as a company. And I think you've probably, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. John Gottman, like sure. His work and stuff. So probably the world's leading psychologist when it comes to relationships. Mm-hmm. And he's, after working with over 40,000 couples in the past 40 years, he can predict divorce with a 90% accuracy. And so, you know, this just kind of like proves like the credibility and authority you have on the subject, because, you know, when I read his book, 7 Principles That Make Marriage Work, and then I line it up with your book, I'm like, you're literally like saying like so many of the same things.
Yeah, and we came to it from very different sides of the equation, but we came to the same conclusions.
Yeah.
And I've heard that comparison before, and I think it's a worthy one, you know, because I think we both are looking at reality. Yeah. You know, this isn't what we're saying it should be like. We're just saying this is how it is. Yeah.
So let's talk about some of those things. And obviously that was the crux of your book, but the first thing that you had talked about is kind of this lack of intentionality that people put in with like their marriage. And so tell me about that a little bit.
Well, I think that the first question I talk about in the book is, people say to me in my line of work and in the public work that I do, well, do you think I should get married? And I always say, well, you have to answer a question. And here's the question. What is the problem to which marriage is a solution? And it's shocking to me how few people have ever thought of that. Yeah. Like ever asked themselves that question. People are signing on to do this thing, the most legally significant thing you're going to ever do other than dying. And one of the most personally, you know, like affecting things that you're ever going to do. And you don't ask, why am I doing this? Like, what is the problem that this is supposed to solve? What is the reason why I'm doing this? If the answer is because it's just a thing you do, that's not a great answer. Yeah. Like, why? What is it? Is there a problem that it solves? Is there a benefit it confers upon you? Is there risk associated with that benefit? Or are there second order effects? So I think intentionality is about, we've decided to do this thing. Yeah. What are we both looking for from it? What are our expectations of it? Because if you're saying, well, I want to get married because I'm lonely, well, you could be married and be quite lonely. Yeah, in fact, it could make your loneliness exponentially worse. It's the reason why like there's a misery in New York City that's unlike anything else, because New York is just crowded with people, and yet everyone seems completely alone because no one's even acknowledging the existence of each other. So it feels really weird. Like if I'm in the middle of the woods by myself and I feel alone, that's normal. When I'm surrounded by people and feel alone, that's weird. So being married, like sitting on your couch by yourself and feeling lonely, that's kind of understandable. Sitting on the couch next to someone and feeling lonely, like that's a really... But anyone who's been in a long-term relationship, like I had a friend who once said to me, he was joking, but there was a profound and sad truth in it, is he said, you know, I figured out the moment when I know a relationship is over. And I said, really, what is it? And he said, when I'm having sex with this person and I think, man, one of these days I've got to get laid. And I understood what he meant, because what he meant is I want to feel that thing. Yeah. I want to feel that thing. Right. Like, and I don't feel it right now. Like I used to feel it when I was doing this with this person, and now I don't. So I want to feel it again. And all that is like, yeah, that's the addict's mindset. Like I don't have the rush, you know, that I used to have. So for me, intentionality is about, why are we doing this? Yeah. What do you want from it? What do I want from it? What do you believe it to be? What do you think our commitments to each other should be? What's our baseline that like we'll know when we're slipping from it? Yeah. So those are the things I think people should be bringing to the table. Again, we just don't talk about this stuff. Yeah. It's almost not cool to talk about how to have a good relationship or a good marriage.
It's really strange though, in a sense of like, you know, we're in New York City right now, and there's such a hustle culture here. Oh, yeah. And people are just going after it, and they know what's required if you want to succeed in your given profession. Mm-hmm. And so people are like, okay, I signed up for it, I'm going to do it. But it's like it's either we don't even think about this when it comes to marriage, or it's like you're wanting that drive or whatever, that initial drive to just carry you through years and years and years and years without having the expectation or the conversation that like, no, this is actually going to be like work.
Well, and what's it? Yeah. What's it? Yeah. Like when people say, you know, I'm out here, I'm doing it. Doing what? Yeah. Doing what? Yeah. Like, because as far as I can tell, like, you know, oh, I'm hustling to make money. Okay, right. Why? Like, why? Like, because, you know, money and technology, they offer you real solutions to imaginary problems and imaginary solutions to real problems. I'm lonely. You know, if I have this watch, I won't be so lonely. What? How did you do that math? Like, but that's what advertising is teaching you. It's teaching you that, no, you know why you're lonely? It's your deodorant. Like, it's not. But that'll sell deodorant, you know? So I just don't think, like, I want to know what the it is. Well, we said we're going to do it. Do what? Get married? Okay, you want to getting married's a blast. Being married is not as much of a blast. And people are great at getting married. People excel at getting married. Getting married is like an incredibly successful activity. Like, it is a billions of dollars industry, the wedding industry, and people love getting married. And by the way, it's what's not to love? There's cake, there's clothes, there's photographers, you're the center of attention, there's music, you do the chicken dance. Like, there's so much cool. There's a buffet, there's the past hors d'oeuvres. Pigs, how often you get to eat pigs in blankets normally, right? But weddings, 9 out of 10 pigs in blankets. And they're great. So to me, of course you want to get married, but being married and getting married have nothing to do with each other. Yeah. Like, the experience of being married is much less exciting than the experience of getting married. So I understand why everybody wants to get married. Yeah. But why you'd want to be married and stay married, I'd like to know the answer to that for most people. Yeah. Because if the answer is, because I think, like, my life will be better if I have someone who can see my blind spots and I can help see theirs, but we always know that when we, like, tell each other about something we're getting wrong, that we're doing it because we're cheering for each other and we love each other and we want each other to succeed. And I know I have this person who's, like, always on my side, you know, and when I get it wrong and they tell me I get it wrong, I'll, like, know this is coming from love. They wouldn't be saying it to hurt my feelings. Like, they're saying it because I need to hear it, so I'm going to hear it with love. Yeah. You know, and when I say it to them about their stuff, I'm going to say it with love. Like, man, if you say that, like, if that's a stock, that marriage, I'll buy it. Yeah. But most people never even have that conversation. And if they have the conversation, it would be like, oh, I don't know, because, like, you know, we've been dating for a while, so it's like the thing you do. Yeah. Which to me is totally different. Yeah, I mean, you talked about the fallacy of, like, how people kind of treat their marriage as like a endurance event. Oh, well, I just think that's cultural. Like, look, I grew up very Catholic, and I grew up going to Mass every Sunday. Yeah. And I remember, you know, I'd talk to my classmates in Catholic school, and I would know about the parents that were alcoholics and the parents that beat their kids and cheating on each other and, like, all them. And then you'd see them sitting in the pews, you know, their happy, smiling face. It was the precursor to Instagram, church on Sunday. Yeah. And it taught me something about sort of the performative self versus the actual. And I think that is, you know, a piece of this, is that there is not, I think that we have lost the plot as to the connection between who we really are and who we really want to be, and why this technology has anything of value to add to that. Yeah. How much of a role in divorce do you feel like going through hard things is? Like, for instance, let's just say somebody lost a child together, or there's some sort of, like, catalytic event, or years of a catalytic event, or a disease or something that, like, affected one or the other. And so how much of, like, divorce do you feel like is you gave two examples there, one of which is a unique category. The marriage, the divorce statistics for couples that lose a child is incredibly high. Yeah. There's something unique about the experience of losing a child, particularly, like, I don't mean just in the form of a miscarriage, I mean in the form of, like, a child, like, who's past a certain age. Yeah. I think the divorce statistic, it's, like, through the roof. It's an insane number. And I've done about 5 divorces where someone lost a child. There's something horribly sad about watching that divorce, because you see that what it is that they're in so much pain, and they can't help but remind each other of what they've lost. Yeah. And so I find that tragic, but it's a unique category. In terms of what impact painful, difficult things have on a marriage, I think I've seen examples in both directions. I've seen a lot of examples where a marriage is fragile, and adversity happens and it breaks the marriage. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of examples where marriage is what, you know, they call anti-fragile, where challenges make it stronger. Pushing against it makes it build up. Yeah. So I saw a lot of people whose relationships were deepened by COVID, for example.
Yeah.
And I've seen people that the wheels came off during COVID. Because there are people that were like, they hadn't spent time together in a real way. And the closure of jobs or working from home, like forced them to spend time together. And it reminded them of how much they like each other. And it reminded them of how little time they used to spend together and how like suddenly they were kind of able to, and they remembered, and they also sort of had this common fear, and they worked in service of the common denominator of the family. Yeah. And that was a beautiful thing. And then there were people that were like, I said for better or for worse, I didn't say for lunch, like I can't be with this person this much. Yeah. And it after COVID, like not that there was like a trumpet sounding saying that COVID was over, but after the world opened up again, we had a rush of business. There was a rush in the divorce rate.
Yeah, I mean, Gottman speaks about the importance of, he talks about turning towards each other like on a daily basis. And you also talked about the importance of like doing little things. Mm-hmm. Like, and the granola and the blowjob example is just like one little thing of that.
I talk about in the book too, I'm sure you recall, is there's a chapter called Hitting Send Now.
Yeah, yes.
And that's a lot about checking in.
Yeah.
And sharing and saying things that might be hard to say and hearing things that might be hard to hear, but that are important.
Radical honesty.
Radical honesty in a non-defensive, non-antagonistic way, and in a way that doesn't provoke defensiveness.
Yeah.
And that is seen as in service of the relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge piece of it, is I think we all need routine preventative maintenance, and we can't hear what other people don't say. Yeah. I wish we could. Like, I wish that guy had been able to see, hey, this granola is important to her, man. Like, you have a superpower and you don't even know it. You're buying this granola. Like, you don't even know you're doing it. Yeah. And she loves it. Like, I can't tell you how many times in a relationship I've had a woman I was dating say to me, like, oh my God, I love when you do X, Y, and Z. And I go, what? Like, I didn't even think you noticed that I do that. And they're like, oh my God, it's so, like, like my partner now, there's this, like, I do this thing when I'm like working very intensely where I have my hands to the side of my, and I guess if I do it long enough, like my hair sticks up. And they always say to me, they're like, oh, you had an intense day. And I go, how do you think? Oh, because your hair's sticking up. And they're like, I love that. I love that hair. Yeah. Like that little stuck up hair. It's like a sign of your intensity. And I'm like, I would never notice that. Yeah. But that's the stuff. Like, that's the stuff. Like, and you have that. Anyone who's ever been in a relationship, you have that.
Yeah.
And it might be some dumb, I'm giving another hair example, but like that dumb little, when a woman has like the ponytail and like one little piece falls out, like, oh my God, that's the hottest thing in the world. It's so cute. And that's like, would you think a woman would know that and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that deliberately? Like, I'd probably not. Because these are the things, you know? And I feel like if that guy in the blowjobs granola example had been able to say to her in a because it's really easy for that conversation to be, you used to do this and now you don't.
Yeah.
And then the response becomes, well, I don't because, you're not that nice to me. Why should I be nice to you?
It's like a scorecard, yeah.
Right. But I have to believe, as someone who persuades people for a living, as someone who manipulates people's emotional state for a living, because that's what I do at the core, like, because I manipulate people's emotional state. I want the other side to feel scared. I want my client to feel safe. I want the judge to feel sympathetic towards me and hate my adversary. So I manipulate people. I could use those powers for good or for evil. And you're telling me, like, this isn't like a talent that, like, oh yeah, I can juggle 3 chainsaws. Like, this is easy. You could do this. This is not that hard. Like, this is behavior modification for dummies. Yeah. Like, you're telling me we couldn't come up with a way to say to her, like, oh, I had a dream last night about, remember when you gave me that blowjob at blah, blah, blah. Like, I was thinking about that. Like, God, that was like, I have to tell you, you are the best at that in the whole wide world, man. I find myself sometimes thinking about that 3-4 times a day. You're telling me that at least give this person a chance to go, really? Like, you like that much? Like, like, you're telling me you're not going to get that blowjob? You are. Like, if he had any idea what that granola meant to her, you think he's not going to buy that granola? And by the way, if he knows what it means to her and deliberately doesn't do it, then get divorced. Because then it's an act of war.
Yeah.
Like, but I really believe that it's like we just don't hear what the other one doesn't say. Like, I'm not surprised a woman doesn't know how much a blowjob means to me. They've never received one. They don't know the magic that it is. So I get it. Like, I get it. And I get that he didn't get that granola was a big deal. Like, but what would have been wrong in that equation where you're both moving in the same direction at some point, even if it's just when you walk down the aisle after the thing, like to just go, hey, did you want it to be like this?
Yeah.
Like, is this what the goal was?
Yeah.
Like, because I thought like the goal, and the earlier you do that, the better. Like the sooner you establish the baseline and say, well, this is what it is. So when we start to see it go, let's check in and let's just see, like, is this just a transient thing or is this like a thing?
Yeah. So so what's this thing that you call the death spiral? What is that in a marriage?
I think it's what we just talked about, which is you can justify almost any discourtesy or lack of love and courtesy to each other based on what, because you can't be in a relationship with someone that is so day to day and not find an abundance of things to be pissed about or to be grateful for, by the way. Yeah. So you can, I mean, this is just this very human trait. Like, if you ever had a toothache, I've had a toothache. When you have a toothache, that's all you can think about is that you have a toothache. And then you go to the dentist or do whatever, and it's gone. And for like a day, you're like a Buddhist monk. You're like, oh, at least I don't have a toothache. Yeah. Like I woke up and I don't have a toothache. Yeah. Do you think I woke up today and I went, I don't have a toothache?
Probably
it's
not.
It's a good day. Yeah. Not at all. For sure. I'm an ungrateful bastard. I didn't wake up today and go, oh, none of my kids are terminally ill. What? Like what? Because why would you even have that thought? Like only if someone you knew's kid was terminally ill would you have that thought. And then you would have it. And you would have it in abundance and you'd have so much gratitude in your heart, So I think the death spiral for me is about you're just focusing on all those other things. Like, well, he hasn't bought me granola. Well, I didn't buy you granola because you're not nice to me. And well, I'm not nice to you because you never talk to me. Well, I don't talk to you because every time we talked, you just run me over. Well, I run you over because you never get to the point. Well, I never get to the point because you're the only person I really get to talk to in any kind. And now, you know what? You're both right. You're both right. Great job. You're both right. You have a right to your misery. Awesome. Great job, guys. Yeah. Super. By the way, I thought, I was mistaken perhaps, but I thought you signed on for eternity with this person to help make their life better and have them make your life better. And this is how you're doing it. This is going to work. Whereas, again, it's so easy to not do it that way. You can do the other direction just as easily, which is to just keep, it's what they taught us in Catholicism, act as if you had faith and faith will be given to you. Yeah. Like just aspire, it's to the verb part of love. Yeah. Like to just act with love, act with compassion, act with empathy, act with encouragement, act with optimism towards your partner. I'm not saying walk around like an idiot, like, oh, everyone's out to help me. Like that's reverse paranoia is the worst thing in the world. Like no one's really out to help you. But your partner, especially at the start, there were 8 billion people in the world and you picked me. Yeah. And I picked you. Like, man, we don't owe each other anything? No, we do. I don't care what the magazines tell you. I don't care what the latest Oprah's book club thing says that like you don't need to do anything to each other. Okay, cool, you're right. You don't. Yeah. You don't owe each other anything. But is this what you signed up for? Is that I'm only going to do what I'm owed? I'm only going to do what I have to do? Or are you going to try to like be excited about this and make it work?
Yeah, I don't know if I heard this story from you or somewhere else, but I remember hearing about this lady where her and her husband were on the rocks, right, and they're about to get a divorce. And I think a therapist had told the woman, okay, before you go ahead and do that, just do something nice for him every single day for like the next 3 months. Just go and do something that, despite his behavior, despite anything, just go and do the thing, no matter how you feel. Yeah. And at the end of that 3 months, reported back to the therapist, they had never been more in love.
There's a book called The Love Dare.
Yeah.
And it's about that. Yeah. They made a film of it too, but the film's atrocious. It stars Kirk Cameron. Yeah. I think it was called Fireproof. They had to be a firefighter. It was a poorly scripted film, but it was a great concept. And the book, The Love Dare, is, I think, a beautiful idea. And that is just commit for 30 days. before you go through this miserable thing of a divorce, before you like throw everything on the fire, like just try for 30 days to just be incredibly kind and to do something nice every single day and to leave a kind word or like, and what is the cost of that? Like, what's the cost of that? Like just being kind, but even just in the world.
Yeah.
Like, what does it cost you to open the door for somebody and to give them a smile? Like, what does it cost to say like, oh man, I love your hat. It's awesome. Like what does it cost? And by the way, you're human. How good does it feel? Like, how good does it feel when someone sees you and like just is happy with you? Like they're just like, oh man, this is so great. Like this is so nice. Like it feels so good. It's like a superpower, So like, again, you would extend that to a stranger. Like this is your primary partner. You're telling me for 30 days, for a week? I don't think it'd take 30 days. Do it a week. Yeah. Do it a week. Like if you once a day, one of the things I say in the book is leave a note. Yeah. And I would say I had a guy come up to me in the gym the other day. Never met this dude. And he recognized me from my work. And I get recognized more often these days. And this guy comes up to me and he goes, dude, I got to tell you something. He goes, I saw you on Lex Fridman. I got your book. I listen to the audiobook on my way to work every day. And I did the thing about notes. And I was like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah. He's like, dude, it changed my whole marriage. And I was like, really? And he's like, oh my God. He's like, we got a 1-year-old. He's like, we weren't not getting along. He's like, but it was kind of like, eh. He's like, and I just started every day when I leave for work, I just leave her a note. Yeah. He's like, and I would just write like, hey, it was so fun hanging out with you on the couch last night. Like I married the prettiest girl in the world. Love you. Yeah. He's like, in the first couple days, like the first day, she's like, what's going on? Like, what do you do? What was that note for? And he was like, nothing. I just wanted to leave you a note. Like, and she's like, right, but like, why? Like, it's not like what? Like, it was very like, this is not you. And he's like, I said to her, I was like, oh, I just been like thinking that I just need to like, I should say more often how much you mean to me. And he was like, dude, I'm married to a different person. He's like, it's like 3-4 weeks later, I'm married to a different person. He's like, she's so like nicer to me. He's like, I don't know how else to put it. And I was like, well, you're being nicer to her. He's like, well, no, I'm just leaving a note. I'm like, it's not the note. It's that you're noticing her. You're reminding her that you notice. I said, is she still the prettiest girl? He's like, yeah, of course I love her. I'm like, okay. I'm like, all you're doing is telling her that. Yeah. I was like, you're not even lying to her. I was like, to me, you're the prettiest girl. Like if I was in the room, you're still the girl I'd pick. Like, dude, how beautiful of a sentiment is that? Yeah. That's the most lovely. And what did it cost you? It cost you nothing. Yeah. Like they want to tell you that you need to buy her a Birkin bag to make her feel special. A $23,000 handbag, probably made by a 5-year-old. Really, it's a note. It's a note. It's a kind word. It's a touch. It's a gesture. That's it. That's what this is made of. And you're not going to ever see it advertised because there's nothing you need to buy. You don't need anything. You just have to just be kind, warm, empathetic, compassionate.
That's so good. I wanted to touch on this because, this particularly comes up like a lot, stereotypically for men, but like the role of sex, right? So if people just stop having sex in marriage or whatever, like how often does this come up and how big of an issue do you think that it is?
Yeah, it comes up all the time.
Yeah.
It comes up a lot for men. Yeah. A lot more often for men than for women. That's not to suggest that women don't like sex and that sex isn't important to women, but I'm just saying in terms of clients, men more often identify like bed death, as like a thing, So I think sex is the glue. I think it's really important. I think that sex is one of our primary drives, and I think it doesn't go away as you age. I think that it remains something. And of course, there is still something to be said for the biological reality of we crave variety, we crave, all those kinds of things. But I think we less crave those things when we are satisfied. Yeah. So it's one of the reasons why you eat a salad before you eat your meal, because like the salad will fill you up a little bit, And I don't think that even the most like sexually satisfied person who's having sex with their spouse, who's the only person they've had sex with, and they're having sex with that person for the last 10 years, there's probably a novelty that's worn off. Yeah. But bet it's still satisfying. It scratches the itch. It's not to say that you're not going to feel temptation, but maybe the pull of that temptation is not so great. Maybe it's like what I said earlier. It's like the potato chips you got to put on your shoes and drive around for. You're like, yeah, okay, that'd be fun, but it's not worth screwing up what I have.
Yeah.
But it's real easy when you're not getting your needs met at all. To go, hey, I deserve to have my needs met. And guess what? Yeah. There's advertising again. Yeah. You deserve a break today. Yeah. Everyone, by the way, in the whole world.
Ashley Madison.
Ashley Madison was life is short, have an affair. Yeah. But McDonald's is worse. McDonald's is you deserve a break today. Really, McDonald's? The whole world? Yeah. Everyone in the whole world deserves a break today. I have a roommate from college that all he does is sits on his couch smoking weed and playing Call of Duty. He deserves a break from that? Yeah. Is that what you're saying? He deserves a break from that in the form of McDonald's? Like, that is a ridiculous statement that everyone deserves a break today. So it's the same thing. Like you're telling me that like the constant parade of sexual novelty and sexual provocation that's being thrown at us from everywhere, the proliferation of porn, which is like the most stylized, idealized version of sex that's designed like a cigarette. You know, cigarettes are designed to deliver nicotine perfectly. Perfectly. They have all the chemicals in them to perfectly deliver the hit of nicotine that's going to addict you to nicotine. That was by design. Like big tobacco, their papers admit that. Like, yeah, we have designed this thing to be the perfect nicotine addiction delivery system. You're telling me porn's not the same thing? Porn's designed to like excite, entice, and intensify your sexual desire as much as possible and as frequently as possible. And you're ceding control of your desire to that element. Like, it's not here to help you. McDonald's is not here to help you. Pornhub is not here to help you. Yeah. They're here to hook you and to take from you, and they don't care what you lose. And if what you want is what you signed on for, like, you don't have to get married. Yeah. You don't. People live satisfying lives not getting married. But the majority of people, 9 out of 10, are going to get married at some point. Yeah. So it has some value. It has some purpose. So if you're committed to that, like there has to be some sense of diving deep into it.
I mean, so you talked about like there has to be some purpose, and that was something that I want to talk about. And you know, when we talk about marriage, you talked about it as being as like a technology, and so I think it's important to clarify the different aspect of what the word marriage means, right? There's a spiritual aspect to it, a covenantal aspect to it. There's a legal aspect of it, and then there's even a psychological aspect of it. So
I just had a conversation with Matt Walsh about this, and you know, like a lot of what I would call like Trat cons or Christ cons, like a lot of sort of conservative Republican leaning, particularly people that have a biblical based mindset, or, you know, it could be people that have a Muslim, you know, a mindset. It could be Ben Shapiro and Judaism. Like, I'm naming all Abrahamic religions, but all talk about marriage, but they're talking about it as a covenant. They're talking about it as a call from God to engage in this type of relationship.
It's a spiritual thing, yeah.
Well, it's not even just spiritual. It's a sacrament. I mean, in Catholicism, it's a sacrament. Yeah. You know, it's we used to joke that, you know, there were what we call 3 sprinkle jobs, which is baptism, marriage, and, you know, your funeral. Those are like the 3 times you got hit with the holy water. The reality is that I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, we've given the same name to something that's very, very different. Like, the thing I'm skeptical of is the technology we invented of marriage.
What do you mean by that?
The legislature of the state in which you reside defined marriage I'm talking about the legal status of marriage. And they defined what your rights and obligations are that arise from that relationship. And most people who are in a marriage have no idea what their rights and obligations are when it comes to that legal status. None, zero. They have no idea what they signed on for. And by the way, what they signed on for and what's currently applicable may not be the same thing, because matrimonial law, family law, the domestic relations law changes constantly. The legislature changes it all the time. It's changed dozens of times in fundamental ways in the 25 years I've been practicing law. Statements I used to say to a client 20 years ago are no longer legally applicable or accurate. Yeah. So you're signing on for something that they can change the rules of out of your, and who, when I say they, who do I mean? The government. Yeah. So all these same Republican, conservative leaning, I don't trust the government. What is the CDC telling me what I can do with my body? What's the government telling me what I have to pay taxes to? What's that? They're like, oh yeah, but let's let them decide the most fundamental relationship that I have. They can make the rules for that, and they can change the rules for that, no problem. I trust the politicians enough that they'll do that. Really? Have you ever been to the DMV? Have you ever walked into the DMV and been like, these people should run my life. Like, they're doing great at this. No one has ever thought that at the DMV. Yeah. Well, all that is government work, guys. It's government work. So you're telling me the people who won a popularity contest in the form of an election, okay, and whose job is to keep that by convincing you that they're hearing your best, like, how many problems of yours has government done an efficient job of solving? Do you feel like you're driving around going like, oh man, things are good. Things are good. The government is crushing it these days. Like, did you halfway through COVID, did you go like, man, guys, we are on this. We have done a great job. We really all pulled together. Yeah. Like, it's the opposite. So you're going to let them govern what happens in your home with your finances, what your rights and obligations are to each other in the event that your marriage ends, which, by the way, every single marriage ends. It ends in death or it ends in divorce. Every one of them ends. It's the only thing that you ever say, I really hope this ends in death. I really hope that's how this ends. I actually said that to Matt Walsh the other day. I said to him, I hope your marriage ends in death. Yeah. That's not an insult. Yeah. That's a compliment. I want you to stay married for as long as you're alive. Yeah. I hope your marriage ends in death, but it's going to end. It's going to end in death or divorce. Now, death, you make a will because you say, I don't trust the government to make decisions about where my stuff goes. And that's smart. That is smart. Anyone, regardless of political affiliation, if somebody said, well, I have a will, they'd be like, that's weird. No, it's not weird at all. It's weird not to have a will. It's irresponsible not to have a will. Yeah. Okay, but the other way that marriages end, more than 50% of the time, is divorce. But it's unromantic to have a prenup, where you and your person who you love more than any of the other 8 billion people on the planet have made the rule set that can't be changed by the legislature that's going to govern your marriage. Like, if marriage is a sacrament, if marriage is a covenant, if marriage is something that we are called by God to do, is God saying just do it blindly? Like, just do it blindly. Don't worry, trust the government. They'll take care of it. They're very positive when it comes to God. They're really into it. Come on. That's not true. We know that we should trust each other, this person you're marrying, their rule set more than you would a legislature that, by the way, hasn't even been elected yet half the time. Because you get married and 5, 6, 7 years later, if you're getting divorced, like, that's the people that are going to govern your marriage. And who's going to decide when you see your kids? Who's going to decide? Who's going to decide? A person who went to law school and got out of law school and went, rather than make like 10 times what I could make, I think I'll take a 9-to-5 job where I get to wear a black robe and yell at people. You want that person? You're going to show that person's going to make the best decisions for you. Okay, cool. Yeah, see how that goes.
Well, I think for me, it's less about the government and the specific rules that they're making around marriage, and more about, so you're creating this separation between the legal, the whatever, psychological, spiritual, whatever, all these, the covenantal thing. And so for me, it's like all of those things are kind of the same thing in the sense that, all right, if you talk about attachment theory, right? So I think that marriage, in a sense, is like kind of the capstone of you signifying to that other person that you're securely attached to them. And so
in theory, that's the goal.
Yeah. So I mean, if you look at attachment theory, I was discovered by John Bowlby in the 1950s, right? And so
it's very in right now.
Yes,
it's in the zeitgeist. Yes. Everyone's talking about their secure attachment style or their avoidant attachment style.
Yeah.
Or their
yes.
It's like the thing. But gaslighting, narcissism, and attachment styles. 2024, baby. And
so I mean, if you're on a dating app, right, and like you're interacting, you're on a date with someone, whatever, you could probably almost immediately sense from their behavior over a specific period of time whether they're anxious, whether they're avoidant, whatever, they're secure, right? So in a sense, I think, the most natural thing to do if you're both securely attached to an individual, an ultimate sign of commitment is to say, I'm going to be there for you and I'm going to sign this document to prove it. And so I'm going to inconvenience myself if it goes sideways, as a sign of a commitment to myself, to you. And so I think that when you look at marriage versus cohabitation, it's like Dr. Tim Keller has this quote. He says, when unmarried people live together, they certainly see each other up close. But each party knows the other one does not have the same claims on him or her that would be true if they were married. They don't merge their whole lives socially, economically, legally, and so either one of them can walk away with relatively few complications if they don't like what they're being told. Mm-hmm. And so I think in a sense, yes, it'll be extremely complicated. I actually agree with everything you said, the mess of what divorce actually means. Mm-hmm. But I actually feel like to withhold that final thing from a person could, in a sense, create a sense of anxiety or like what I'm separate from you in a sense, but I'm saying that I'm one with you. But I don't want to make that final step of like signing this legal thing and merging our entire lives because I think it might end one day. And from a statistical standpoint, what you're saying makes complete sense, right? So 50% of people are going to get divorced. Yeah. Like it makes sense, right? Yeah. But can we actually operate that way in our relationships? Can we actually operate that way and have securely attached relationships if we're like, well, we're going to do this thing, but it might end? Or are we going to do the thing and it might blow up in our face, but at least we're taking steps to have a secured, healthy relationship with that person. Yeah. So I don't know. What do you think about
I think it's a very interesting argument. I don't think it's valid, but I think it's an interesting one. Here's my problem with it. I think what you're essentially saying there is that the more someone is willing to wager, the more they believe in the thing, right? Because what you're saying is, like, I don't really have any skin in the game. If I've got this rule, I mean, I don't really buy that because I think to say, well, it's the expense and messiness and misery of the divorce process that like is, it's the way you prove, because that's the loss. No, the loss is the loss of the relationship. That's just the icing on the cake. Yeah. But I don't think that the symbolic wager part of that is that worthwhile. Like I agree we live, like one of my professors in graduate school, Neil Postman, wrote some amazing books, Amusing Ourselves to Death, The Disappearance of Childhood. But Neil was fascinated by the fact that a lot of people claimed to not believe in God. Yeah. And so he used to do this experiment. You could never do it now, but you could do it when he was teaching. And he used to say to his graduate school class, how many people here believe in God and the devil and a soul? And you're a grad school at NYU, you'd have like 2 hands in a room of 50. Yeah. And you go, great. Here's what I'm gonna ask you to do. Write on a piece of paper that you pledge your eternal soul to me. And let me have the piece of paper. Now, if you don't believe in God or the devil or the soul, why wouldn't you do that? Like, why wouldn't you do that? Like, it's a piece of cake. Like, you don't believe in it. Like, it's fine. Like, I'll give you all the diamonds I have in my right pocket because I know I have none. So it doesn't mean anything, so go ahead. And he said, like, very few students would do it. And fairly often someone would do it just to be defiant, and then they would come to his office hours the next day and say, do you still have that? Could I have it back? I feel very weirdly uncomfortable with it since I gave it to you. Yeah. Because there is something inside of you that's like, I'm not sure, actually. Like, I think I'm sure, but I'm not sure. Like, logically I'm sure, but emotionally I'm not, or my gut feels otherwise. So I think that's relevant to your theory of this in the following way. I think, first of all, the problem with, because what you're talking about is creating barriers to exit to incentivize people to work harder on the relationship. That would be useful if everyone was in equal places in a marriage, that like it was always both people's fault or both people had sort of let it slip. The truth is there are a lot of times where like divorce is thrust upon someone because one person in the equation broke. Like you can't control the emotional state of another person. You can try to affect it. You can try to move the dial, but it's no guarantee. Like there's no one who, like, do not buy my book if you think I'm buying this book and it'll guarantee I'm going to be able to stay married. It won't. There's no one. Esther Perel, a team of us working around the clock, could not make that guarantee to anybody. Yeah, of course. So what you're really saying is, I'm going to try to give you some ways to like affect the outcome, but you know, it's someone else. You can only affect another person so much, you know, yeah. And you only have so much control over what another person does. So to say we both have to wager everything or like way more because we've created this real barrier to exit, this real cost of exit, because it'll force us both to be more invested. Like, not if one person's risk adverse and the other one isn't, or if one person thinks that the grass on the other side of the fence is so much greener that it's worth it to burn your life up as well as theirs, or go through that pain. See, I happen to believe that barriers to entry would be a better solution. Like, there's a waiting period to get a handgun. Like, okay, do a waiting period to get married. And I think most traditional conservative people who are talking about no-fault divorce and how bad it is that like people can get divorced easily, that feels to me like saying like we got to get rid of these emergency rooms because there's so many sick people in them. It's like, right, they're not like, ooh, there's an emergency room, let's go do reckless stuff because there's an emergency room right here. Like, I don't think that's true. I think that it's filled with hurt people because people are getting hurt all the damn time, and that's there to fix the problem. Like, I'm not walking around bars, walking up to people going, you could do better. Like, here's my card. I don't do that. Like, people are screwing up marriage on their own, no problem. I don't have to help facilitate that. Yeah. So what I think would make sense if you are someone who says we need to take marriage more seriously, which I absolutely agree with. Yeah. My oldest son, just got engaged to a lovely young woman. And I'm cheering for them. I'm cheering for them. I hope it works out. Like, cause I think, life as a married person can be wonderful if you do it the right way. But I'll tell you, the advice I've given him is the advice I give to everyone in my books and in my speaking. Just take it seriously. And what better to help people take it seriously than barriers to entry? Because I don't think barriers to exit works. We've tried we've tried fault-based divorce. All it did, I was practicing law when we had fault-based divorce in New York. All it did was made me an extra 10, 20 grand on every case because we'd argue about fault. And you could always conjure up, because the truth's at the bottom of a bottomless pit. Yeah. You'd always conjure up some reason why these people were getting married, why there was emotional cruelty, it's easy. These are huge definitions. They're very subjective. It's very, very easy. So all it did was just make more controversy for us to argue over. And I don't think that more people took their relationships less seriously because divorce was easier to get or cheaper. Yeah. I really don't believe that. I think that most people don't screw up their marriage intentionally. They just aren't paying attention. And if you think that by making a big bet, that's the easiest and best way to get people to pay attention to their marriage, like I don't see any evidence to support that.
I'm not necessarily saying that like the purpose of the legal aspect is to create a higher barrier to entry, as much as I'm saying is a sign of a commitment. And so it's
the barrier to exit, you mean?
No, I'm saying that the legal aspect of signing this thing is not so much of like, oh, I'm creating this big barrier, like forcing someone to be like in a marriage that they like don't want to be in, right? Like that, I don't think that that's really productive. I'm saying on the front end, signing this legal thing is traditionally has been known as, this is my sign of commitment to you. Otherwise, why would you even sign the thing?
Well, that's the idea of marriage. Yeah. Listen, there's plenty of people, and I don't think you could ever make a cogent argument to the contrary. If I said, oh, this is my girlfriend, or if I said, this is my wife, like you take the second one much more seriously. Like she gets a vote. Like anything I'm doing, she gets a vote. Because like we're one person, Meanwhile, my girlfriend could have been my girlfriend for 10 years and we're deeply committed to each other and have a bunch of kids together. And my wife could be somebody like a stripper I met in Nevada and went and had Elvis marry me for $50. Sure, yeah. So I understand that we've conferred on the title, wife, husband, more validity. This is why same-sex marriage became such an important part of the zeitgeist. Do you think that gay couples were sitting around going like, oh, the straight people are loving being married. It's so great. They're having such a great time. Like marriage is miserable for most people, the majority of people. So I have a lot of gay friends. I live in Chelsea. Like I remember when marriage equality happened, saying to like a couple of my gay friends, like, so like you stoked? And they were like, no, I'm not stoked. Yeah. Like now I have to have this conversation. We never had to have this conversation before. I'm dating somebody now. It's like, well, where's this going? Are we going to get married? Are we going to have kids and adopt kids? What are we doing? Like, and he's like, I never had to do that before. So I get it. Like I get that, but I understand what they wanted. They wanted to be able to be like, this is my person. They're my official person. But I guess my challenge.
So is there value in that?
I don't know. It's not for me to say. For me, there's not value in that. But for some people, there might be. Like, remember when you were a kid and you had your friends, but then you had your best friend? This is my best friend. It's like MySpace, my top 5, right? My top 5 people on MySpace. Like these are my people. You know, like my best friend. Like as a grown ass man, if I said to you like, oh, my friend, he's my best friend. Oh my God, I was out to lunch with my best friend. You would be like, what is wrong with this person? What are you, 5? Like that's a childish thing. Like that someone is you're not my best friend anymore. Brian's my best friend now because he's like more fun than you. Like that's the weirdest thing. You have to make a designate. You can't, like, who do you love more, your mom or your dad? Like, that's so weird. Yeah. Like, no, I love my mom differently than I love my dad. Like, what are you talking about? Like, is there a does everything have to be hierarchical? You know, it doesn't have to be, right? Do you love your wife more than your dog? Do you love your dog more than your cat? Like, what sane person would be having that conversation? So for me, this is love, but it's like double special extra love because we're married. Like, really? Government status made that a thing for you? Like, I've been with my person for 10 years. You've been with your wife for 6 months, but because you guys signed a contract and took an oath, whether it's an oath or whether it was an oath, whatever oath you took, like that makes your relationship more valid. That's insane. Yeah. That's insane. That's not how it works. And by the way, it's not honest. Because look at how many marriages end in divorce. So it's not a sign that you're deeply committed to each other, and it's not. I mean, in theory it is, in the idea it is, in the concept it is, but like that's insane. Like that's not true.
I mean, I've been arguing from the psychological perspective, obviously, and you know, we can go back and forth on that. But I think that this conversation.
But marriage is not like I understand that, but marriage is fundamentally a legal status. I'm a lawyer. Like this is a legal status. When you get married, you might be doing it for religious reasons. You might be doing it for psychological reasons. You might be doing it for some combination of all those reasons. You are signing up for a legal status. That's what you're doing. It may be all kinds of other reasons why you do it, but it is a legal status. At its core, at least the part of it I touch, is legal. It's a legal status.
Well, I think where the conversation gets more nuanced, obviously, and this is where things split, is like if someone, you know, believes in God and is following a particular religion, and they're not, right? And so I don't know if this came up in your conversation with Matt Walsh or whatever, but like they're the advocates of people who might be Christian or whatever, or even Muslim. Like they're advocating for that the legal is actually part of that covenantal aspect of the marriage, and so that might not hold relevant. I don't know where you're at spiritually or whatever.
I've had discussions / debates with it. Matt is one of them, Matt Walsh. I've had this guy, Andrew Wilson from The Crucible, who's a phenomenal debater, a brilliant mind, and a Christian conservative. I had probably the best debate I've ever had with him on his channel, The Crucible. It's a YouTube channel that's a debate channel, and he debates a lot of things from like a Christian center perspective. We met in an unexpected, like they just kind of dropped me into this debate. I had no idea who Andrew was, and we ended up having like a knockdown, drag out debate that I was not even ready for. No. But at the end of it, I was like, this guy is, I don't know how he's not like one of the best trial lawyers in the world. He's like an engineer or something by trade. But he's a Christian conservative, very passionate about the stuff he argues about and he debates about. And I debated with him about exactly this. And it's the same debate I had with Matt or anybody else. But fundamentally, what they end up getting to when we have that debate is they go, yeah, the legal part's not important to me. Like that's the paperwork aspect of it. To them, the fundamental covenant is a covenant from the Bible. Like it's a scriptural mandate. It's a call. It's a calling. Like they're not interested really in the legal status is secondary to them. And I don't think that they go, oh yeah, and I think it's a really important piece of it because it incentivizes me to do A, B, and C. Like, no, they're like, no, the Bible tells me what to do. It tells me how to love my wife and honor my wife and how she should relate to me, and it gives me rules. And that's the freedom that comes with faith, whatever that faith is. If the Quran tells you how to treat your wife or your husband, the Bible tells you how to treat your wife or your husband, the Torah tells you how to treat your wife or your husband, like, great, you got a rule book, you got a rule set. I'm a big fan of rule sets. Like I'm a big fan of, as a lawyer, I'm a fan of rule sets. I like to know the rules. I don't think it would be safe to have roads that had signs that say drive, you know, at a speed that's reasonable based on your experience and the weather conditions. Yeah. That is way too subjective. Yeah. So is 55 the right number? I don't know. They got to pick a number. So I guess that's the number. I don't know that it's the right number. So it's the same thing with marriage. Like most of the people I know that are religious and married believe deeply in marriage. but only because it's something they believe in divinely inspired scripture, but it's also something that they see as facilitating the highest and noblest traits of humans and facilitating a society that's ordered and that propagates the species and that lends itself to the type of living that is proffered in that scripture as being the right way to live.
Yeah. What do you think the point of vows are?
The point of vows? I think that...
Like you get up there, you're in front, you talked about, we make this big spectacle of marriage. We spend $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 on this marriage, and then we're up there, we make this big proclamation in front of all these different people. What do you think the point of vows are?
What they are, what is the point of them, or what should it be? Yeah,
what's the point of even making them? What's the point of even saying that?
Well, I think there's tremendous value in saying things out loud. I think there's tremendous value in publicly declaring a commitment. I think it's the same reason why, like, if you were a smoker and you wanted to quit smoking, there's tremendous value in telling a bunch of people that you're going to quit smoking. Well, because they're going to hold you accountable.
Well, in the prenup conversation, isn't that a contradiction to get up in front of a group of people and simultaneously have a prenup? So it's like you're making this proclamation that this thing is going to be hopefully for life, but you keep looking at
prenups like they're like hedging a bet, and I just don't feel like that's what it is. I think it's about a rule set.
What do you mean?
It's about saying that we are going to make the rules that govern certain aspects of our marriage rather than allow the legislature to make that decision for us. Like we're not saying we plan on, just like buying life insurance is not saying I plan on dying, but you're saying, there are things beyond my control that may happen. And if they do, I'd like to know what the outcome most likely will be. Yeah. So like rules governing what you owe each other, like that's a valuable, even if you're not going to have a prenup, having a conversation about a prenup is incredibly valuable. What do I owe you? What do you owe me? What will we do when this goes wrong? Like, what will we do when we fight? Like, this isn't always going to be perfect. We're human. We're going to make terrible mistakes sometimes, What will we do when that happens? How will we treat each other? What do we owe each other? Because here's the thing, like, I don't doubt if I get married and I build a business from scratch and my wife is home taking care of me or taking care of the kids or even is working herself and helping support me financially while I follow this dream of mine, and I become incredibly successful, and now we're getting divorced. I believe with all my heart she deserves half of that. Without doubt. What sane person, non-selfish, narcissist person could say that person doesn't deserve it? But wait for a second. Think about the logic of that. You wouldn't have it if it wasn't for her. Okay, let me ask you this. Your wife wouldn't be who she is if it wasn't for her father and mother, right? And the way they treated her and the way they raised her. So do you owe them too? How much do you owe them? Do you owe them all of it? Do you owe them 50% of the 50%? What percentage do you owe? By the way, her grandmother is responsible for what her mother was like, and her mother's responsible for what she's like. And what she did made her responsible for what she did for you. So how much do you owe her grandma? Like, do you owe her half? So like, how much do I get to keep 1/100th? Like, how many lines of generations? Is it just people that are alive that I owe it to? Like, this is craziness if you don't deconstruct it in some fashion. And if you don't, who better to have this conversation with than the person you're signing up for this with? That in that moment of abundant optimism and deep commitment to each other, you are saying there are 8 billion people and you're going to be mine and I'm going to be yours. That's the time to talk about, and what will we owe each other? And to pick it. To write your rules. So it's not about, for me, hedging your bets. It's about saying, let's have a conversation about what we're going to owe each other. Let's have a conversation about if we fall apart, which God, I hope we don't. And let's talk about how we're gonna, because again, we're most aware of life when we're in the presence of death. We're most aware of health when we just got over being sick. So I think talking about ending marriages is a very healthy thing. I think talking, like, your love is loaned to me. It's not permanently gifted. I should earn it every day. Every day I should earn your respect. I should earn your love. I should earn your affection. What are those notes? But earning your affection. and earning it honestly. It's an honest wage. Like, it's an honest wage. Like, I mean it when I'm saying I want to make you happy. Like, and so that's an honest transaction. So why not? Why not be honest in that transaction? I think that is so much healthier than just getting. So that's what for me, a vow is a public commitment to an aspiration. And it also, for me, is about the world, because we live in a world. We don't live in a vacuum. So I'm saying to all of my friends, hey, hold me accountable. Like, this is what I want. I'm signing up today for this, that this is my person. Yeah. And so when you see me doing something, if you love me, you won't be my yes man. You'll say to me, hey, dude, you losing the plot? What are you talking to that girl for? Like, you got that woman at home. Remember when we stood in front of that group of people and told everybody how much you love her more than anything in the world? Like, what was that about, man? Like, I'm not going to laugh at your behavior. I'm not going to sit here next to you and go like, yeah, no, she's hot. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to feed that to you. I'm going to be your accountability part. Like, I always said that this is the reason why every great musician's third album sucks. Because their first album was raw talent. And their second album was raw talent with good production behind it. And their third one was suddenly they're surrounded by a bunch of people telling them how great they are. And when they pulled out a banjo, and we're like, I think I'm going to put banjo on this album, they didn't have anybody around them to go, dude, no, what are you doing? Put the banjo away. You people don't come to hear you play banjo. Like, they tell it like it is, because they care about you. If you're surrounded by yes people, that's how you end up building a life that's misery most of the time.
No, I really appreciate like the intentionality and the elevation that you're putting on this commitment or whatever. And I actually see completely eye to eye with you on that. Is like, I think as a society we've made like a joke out of this thing. And ironically, our podcast episode, Dan Blazarian, I mean, he was talking about the same thing is in the sense of like the hold that you feel like you have on someone and taking that for granted. And so I actually really appreciate that perspective, because I feel like we should never be taking a person for granted. Yeah. And then I think if you are using the legal aspect of marriage as this like fail-safe of like, oh, well, no, I have them. And no, I think it's ridiculous. Yeah.
That conversation with Dan, I think, was a very powerful one. And I watched it, and I enjoyed it very much, and I found it very powerful because I remember when he became a thing. Yeah. And I remember I was a fairly young man when he was like first burst on the scene. And I remember like any man, there was a part of me that went like, wow. Yeah. Like, I was 22 and married, 24 and had a kid. And I'm looking at this dude with just models and like all the money in the world. And he's just like, oh my God, he's swimming in it. And I remember thinking like, wow, like, look at that. Like, what a life so different from mine. But I never once went like, oh, I would love that life. Like, I remember thinking like, oh, it'd be fun for like a day. Yeah. But like, this is a path to nothing. Like, this is a path to nothing, because there's only two amounts of money. Like, I'm a divorce lawyer. I have a client who's worth $8 billion right now, and he's getting divorced. I got to tell you, like, there's only two amounts of money: enough and not enough. Yeah. And that's it, you know. And I have clients that are really miserable in penthouses, and I have friends that are in little tiny apartments and blissfully happy, you know. So money is not solving the problem. It's, again, an imaginary solution to a real problem and a real solution to an imaginary problem. But Dan Blazarian and your conversation with him, I think was really powerful because of what having it all, in air quotes, leads to. Yeah. And I like that it's actually not like a, you know, like there's all these like Faustian, you know, like narratives of like, I had it and then I lost everything, like it all came crashing down. And that feels sort of like, well, it's a little too operatic, you know? Like, I think it's just really a sense of like, yeah, like that's not the path to happiness necessarily. You know, it's not the path to real connection. Like, it's not a coincidence that Neil Strauss, you know, there's so many like people that were like pickup artists or in the pickup scene or in the red pill space or in the manosphere, and like they kind of eventually go like, yeah, the quiet joy of like connection to another human being is actually like kind of nice. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. And so I think honestly, even if you're coming at it from a religious perspective and someone has a legal marriage to someone and they're taking that for granted, like I actually prefer your like perspective. I think that like, I think you need to hold love, you need to hold relationships, and you need to hold marriage into a high regard. And I think a lot of people today are recklessly getting into marriage. They violate all the principles that you just talked about. And then it's just like your original point is like, what is marriage a solution for?
Right. Why'd you do it?
Yeah.
Why'd you do it? Because I think if you keep that in your focus, why you did this.
Yeah.
Because if you say, well, I did it because of religion. Okay. So are you practicing your faith?
Yeah.
Like, what aspects of your faith are you practicing?
Yeah.
You know, like, or are you just performatively
Yeah.
religious? You know, is it for your Instagram? You
It's
know,
the consistency to authenticity,
yeah,
essentially.
Yeah. And well, like, did you lose the plot?
Yeah.
Like, what was the point of the whole thing? And I think that conversation is a great conversation to have. And I think when you do things with intentionality and with your eye on that purpose, that higher purpose, whatever that is for you, it might be, I want to just it doesn't have to be spiritual. It can be, I just know the world is really hard, and I really would love to have someone help me and hold my hand, and I'll hold yours. Yeah. Like that, to me, like, it doesn't have to be any deeper than that. Like, to me, the most beautiful thing is like, this is so hard and scary, and I'd like to hold your hand, and I'd like you to hold mine. Like, that's so beautiful. Like, it's so simple, and it's so real, and it's so beautiful. And so if that was your higher calling, okay, so how can I make you feel safe? How can you make me, what do I need to feel safe? How can you make me feel safe? Like, here's how I feel safe. Like, does it make you feel safe when I have my hand on your shoulder? Yeah. Or does it make you like not? That's okay. Like, we might have different love languages, you know, we might have different ways that we feel loved, right? But why don't we share that with each other? Because again, if we keep our eyes on the purpose, you know, if the purpose was, okay, we're getting married, why? So we can have kids. Like, you can have kids without being married. Yeah. You know, well, we think these are the optimal conditions to raise kids. Okay, there's a good argument to be made about that. But then if you want to maintain an intact marriage, even if you don't have any higher calling to this, wouldn't you just want to maintain it? Like, you just want to maintain. Like, I don't care if you take good care of your car because you love your car, or if you take care of your car because you want to maintain its residual value for when you someday trade it in. Just take care of your car. Like, I don't care if you don't kill me because you think it violates one of the 10 commandments, or because you're afraid it's an A-class felony in the state of New York, or because you recognize my autonomy as a sentient being and that it's not fair for you to kill me. Just don't kill me. We're good. We're good. I don't even have to ask you what your motivation was. Like, as long as you have one, I'm good. It's fine. So in marriage, like, we don't even have to have the same goal. We don't even, as long as we're moving in the same direction. Yeah. And the offshoot of the intentionality is attentiveness and focus and appreciation. Great.
Well, you said like marriage. The one thing that confused me is you said marriage is like a lottery. You're probably not going to win, but if you win, you win so good. And so technically this statement makes sense if you look at the numbers. But if you're practicing the principles that you advocate for in your book and that Gottman talks about and all this stuff, is it really a lottery then? Or
it was so. This is my most commonly misunderstood quote.
Yeah. Okay.
And actually, Matt and I got into this recently because that's where he and I got in a Twitter fight. Yeah. Because he said he did a whole show about how like what I had said was so wrong because you have no control over the lottery and you have control over a marriage. Yeah. And that the chances of winning a lottery are like infinitesimally small. Whereas even if 50% of marriages end in divorce, like you got a 50% chance it's going to work out. Yeah. So I have to clarify, I was not in any way suggesting that they are the same. I don't think I said that. What I was trying to say is that marriage is like the lottery. You're probably not going to win, meaning that it is more likely than not that you will not be successful. And that's just statistically true about divorce, okay? I'm not saying the odds are exactly the same. They're not. It's much more unlikely you would win the lottery than you would be unsuccessfully married, right? Yeah. What I was using the lottery for is that if you win, what you win is a jackpot. It is a massive, so that's why I didn't say marriage is like a fulfilling career. What I meant is buy a ticket and you're probably not going to win statistically. But if you win, what you win is so good, why wouldn't you buy a ticket? Yeah. And so to me, what I really was trying to drill down to there is, what does it cost to buy, why is the lottery a thing? because you're spending this much to potentially get this much. So you go, you might as well play. You got to be in it to win it. Well, marriage is the same thing. You got to be in it to win it. So I'm, as a divorce lawyer, as a divorced divorce lawyer, whose son got engaged a few weeks ago, good for him. Not for future business. I don't want it. And have a prenup. Don't be stupid. Have a prenup. Of course, have a rule set. The two of you should talk about it. Do it. And thankfully they will, because he's a lawyer and she's a lawyer. They met in law school. So they're pragmatic enough to go, yeah, but you know what, man? I'm cheering for them. And I'm going to do everything I can to support that marriage. Yeah. I'm going to do everything I can to be a good father-in-law, to be a good father to my son, who's a good mentor to him, who's encouraging him. I don't think he's ever read my book. That annoys me so much because he's thanked in the acknowledgments.
Your son has never read your book?
I don't think they ever do. Like, I don't think anyone's children think they're impressive. Like Samuel L. Jackson's kids roll their eyes at him. You know, like no one's kids are that impressed by. Someone else's kids are more impressed by me or of me. But I really do think that it is the lottery in the sense that you got to be in it to win it. It's not, in my opinion, if you have a prenup and you're vigilant, right? The barrier to entry isn't that high. Like it's $20, $30 for a marriage license, you know? And your downside risk is significant. It's half your stuff, you know? It's some big things. But if you win, like what you win is so good. Yeah. You know, like my parents were married for 50 plus years until my mother passed away. And my dad, for the 2 years she was on hospice, was by her side. Yeah. And that to me, and were they perfect to each other? No, they were human. They were all too human. They had lots of challenges in their marriage. But was their life better because they married each other? Well, my sister and I exist because of it. Yeah. You know, and I think my mother would say and my father would say that their marriage was an amazing gift to their life. So buy a ticket, take the ride, you know, but take it seriously.
Yeah. I wanted to land in a place of talking about kind of the aftermath. And I alluded to this in the beginning of, you know, I believe that like if we have a proper understanding of marriage, in addition to practicing some of the principles that you're advocating for and that Gottman has talked about, I think it's possible to build a society where divorce rates go down.
Oh, for sure.
They plummet, right?
For sure.
But
with intentionality.
As long as we're breathing, there will be divorce. And so
100%.
Yeah, the 100%. World's not perfect. And so even if they plummet, there's still going to be a percentage that do get divorced. Sure. And so, you know, sometimes life is hard. And
of course. Right. And look, I've never had the attitude of, you know, like, well, you could not smoke and eat 3 balanced meals a day and exercise and you still might get cancer and die prematurely. Like that's how it is. God sometimes goes eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think one of the stupid things that we do as a society, it's like the people who advocate against abortion. It's like, we don't want to talk about like, okay, what do you do with like the mother then or whatever. And so in the same way, it's like, okay, like divorce, if divorce is going to happen, it's like, what do you make and what do you do in the aftermath? And how should we treat people that are being divorced? And I think that there's, you know, depending on why you got divorced, there could be red flags to the person. You were just talking about example, a guy got 5 marriages and you're like, at some point you're like, okay, maybe
it's your fault.
Right. Yeah. So some people could be like, oh, I don't want to date that person. I want to be with that person if they get a divorce or whatever.
Well, you also, you know, it depends on the reliability of the narrator too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think if you ask 2 people why they got divorced, you're going to get 2 different answers a lot of the time. It's a rare thing that she'll say because he's a piece of shit and he'll say because I'm a piece of shit, you know? Like usually it's something much more, you know, the facts all come with points of view, you know? And so it's not quite that simple, but I do agree that we have to think more about what do we do when people have become divorced, whether it was their fault, quote unquote, or whether it wasn't, you know? And again, I'm fuzzy on blame because it's like, well, he cheated. Okay, but you created conditions where cheating became a possibility maybe. Again, that's not to blame the victim, but I don't know. Like, I don't know. And by the way, maybe your kids were an antagonist to the marriage, which then affected things. Like, so again, how many layers of blame are we going down? And what's the purpose of that?
So what about to the person that's gotten divorced? Like in terms of if they feel like they're damaged goods or whatever, like how do you process?
I think it's all about framing. I think everything's about framing. I think I've said to people many times, like, because people very often are ashamed in my office. Like they're like, I know, like, why did I marry this person? And I sort of think like, well, first of all, you didn't necessarily see these traits, or maybe you had, if you have rose-colored glasses on, all the red flags just look like flags, So I get it. But sometimes you say to people, like, I'll joke with my clients, I'm like, hey, everybody's got to do some charity work in their life. You did yours, with this marriage. Or, when somebody says like, yeah, I really screwed this marriage up, I'm like, yeah, I'm not good at anything the first time I do it. Like, first time I do almost anything, I'm an amateur at it. And it takes a little while to get good at things. So I think I think one of the worst things you can ever do is to think that you're broken because you got divorced, whether it's because you screwed up or whether it's because you married someone that wasn't trustworthy and they screwed up. Like, neither one of those should be an indictment of who you are. Like, you could screw up a relationship. And one of the things that was always appealing to me about the gospel of Christ was the idea of just forgiveness and love, that God loves you no matter what, that God always loves you, that there's nothing like forgive 7 times 7 times 7. Like, just believe in the good in people, love them like a good father, like love them the way that God loves you. Like, to me, that is the most beautiful sentiment. And if we bring that to our marriage, like this idea that like we are worthy of love, like we are worthy of happiness, and we deserve it, and we should try to radiate it to the people in our lives, and we should try to create conditions where they want to radiate it to us. And so I think when you get divorced, like, yeah, you failed. Like, it happens. It happens a lot. You sin. Okay, it happens. It happens a lot. Like, everybody screws up. It's okay. This is why we invented safety wheels. That's why we have erasers on pencils. Yeah. Like, it's okay. Like, you didn't get it right that time. Maybe it was the version of you in that moment. Like, you didn't do your best, but you did the best you could do at the time. But maybe next time you'll do better. Yeah. Maybe you learned lessons from this and that you'll never screw it up like that again. You won't let slippage happen next time. Like, maybe, who knows? It's either the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning sometimes when people end up in my office. No. So I really believe in redemption as a general principle. Like, I really believe that you can wake up tomorrow and decide to change your life. And I think that divorce is a humbling and very all-consuming failure. And you can't pretend you meant to get divorced. You didn't. Yeah. No one did when they got married. No one meant to be in my office. But I also believe that, the barn's burned down and now I can see the moon. Like, you can build beautiful things from rubble.
Yeah. What about co-parenting? Obviously you've had a lot of success with that relationship with your, like, the idea of blended families, whatever, all this thing. How does one go about doing that after divorce?
I think mutuality of respect is important. Conceding the possibility of your own error is important. I think putting aside your ego a bit is really important. Like, you can be right or you can be happy. Yeah. I also think you have to have a certain level of self-confidence. Like, my ex-wife's been remarried for 12 or 13 years. And when I met her now longtime husband, my boys were quite young. Yeah. And he was a recently divorced man with a child of his own who was a little older than my boys. And he came to me very early on in their relationship before he even met my sons. And he said, I want you to know, like, I've been through divorce and that I'm never going to try to, like, take your place with your sons. I'm never going to not respect your role, right? And I remember sort of meeting it with so much appreciation, but also kind of humor, because I was like, you don't have to tell me you're not going to be their father. Like, I know I'm their father. I'm not that insecure, But here's what you will be. You're going to, I hope, be another adult in their life that really cares about them. And you know what? Maybe when they're teenagers, they'll be, and they're at that party that they told their mom and I they were at their friend's house, and instead they're at a party and their ride home is drunk. Maybe you're the adult they'll call and be like, please don't tell mom and dad, but can you come pick me up? And maybe you'll save their life. And like, you know what? Like, so you're welcome to this team, man. Like, you're welcome to this team. Like, just be a contributing member to the team. That's all. Like, and I'll support you. I'll support you in your marriage. I'll support you in your, and there were times like where, my ex-wife would call me and be like, oh, he did this. And I'll be like, hey, you know what though? Like, he's a great dude, and he's like, hey, we're all, listen, I get where he's coming from. Like, she got mad at him once because he took my side in something. Like, she was like saying like, yeah, Jim does this. And he was like, well, but Jim has a point. And she was like, are you serious right now? You're taking my ex-husband's side of this argument? But it was done with a lot of love. So to me, the people that have successful co-parenting relationships are people who realize there are certain commitments we are not going to keep. Yeah. But there are certain commitments we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not going to treat dandruff with decapitation. Like, yeah, I'm not going to be married to you, and only you for the rest of my life. That's done now. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Yeah. But are you still on my team? Do I still want to see you succeed? Is your success inextricably woven to mine because we have children together? Are we going to be grandparents together someday? Like, I kept my eyes on the prize. Like, and she did too. By the way, it's not one-sided. Like, if I'd been the only one pulling that weight, it wouldn't have worked. Like when people say to me, "Oh, how did you and your ex-wife do it?" I'm like, because it's me and her. It's not just me. It's the two of us, and it's our respective partners, and it's our, it's all of those things that everybody on the team has to do their piece. But my piece was to be respectful to my co-parent, to get ahead of things, to be communicative in the right ways, to not let my ego, override things, to be deferential to her when it was appropriate to be, and to be clear with her when I disagreed with her, but in a respectful way. So I think there's a lot of the same skills that make a married couple's parenting successful are the same when you get divorced. It's not, one doesn't destroy the other. Your parenting relationship is still your parenting relationship.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of makes you think the death spiral thing that you talked about in the relationship could also sort of be applicable afterwards, especially with behaviors of I'm going to withhold the kids from you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that.
It's true of every relationship. Yeah. It's true of an employer and employee. Yeah. Employees you don't pay me enough. They don't pay me enough to do this. I'm just going to do my job lackadaisically. You think the boss is going to go, I feel really good about that employee and I'm going to incentivize them. No, he's going to be look at this lazy employee. And it's a death spiral. Whereas if you were like, I'm going to go the extra mile on this project and I'm going to make sure the boss sees it because I want him to know that I'm on the team and I'm doing that. And then you think that, again, maybe it'll do nothing. But maybe the boss goes, man, look at the hustle on this one. Like, all right, I gotta throw them a bonus. And now you go, man, I got a bonus. I gotta show them that I really was worthy of it. I'm gonna get another one. This is the same. It's all the same. How you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, and then kind of just to talk about, what about if you're in the midst of divorce and you still have feelings for the other person, because that might be particularly painful.
Sure.
Like one person wants to get divorced, the other person doesn't. It's happening, and
then
going through that process.
Yeah, that's hard. I just had this conversation with a client yesterday because this woman was like, "This is over," and he just doesn't want to face it. He doesn't want to face it. They've had the talk, and he's like, "Nope, we can make it work. We can make it work." He even told the kids, like, "Mom's mad at me, but it's going to be okay." And she's like, no, it's done. And he just refuses to acknowledge that it's done. That's incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard to see because it's difficult, it's sad, but it's very common. Like people don't often come to the exact same spot at the exact same time. Like usually one person is like, okay, I'm ready to call the game. And the other one's like, no, let's keep trying. Or no, let's just stay miserable forever. That's what marriages are supposed to be. Like it's a commitment. We're supposed to stay, if we're not happy, who cares if you're happy? Like there's a whole generation that if you're like, I'm not happy in my marriage, they'd be like, you're not supposed to be happy in your marriage. Shut up. What are you talking? That's like this generation when you say like, I don't like my job. They're like, you're not supposed to like your job. You're supposed to do your job. But we are now like, oh, I'm not madly in love with my spouse. Okay, so what? You made a commitment to him. But if you're defining marriage as something that should be more joyful than not, more often than not, then yeah, you're right. It's a different standard you're holding it to. But what do you do when you don't want to let go and your partner? Look, marriage is one of those things that if one person's decided the marriage is over, it's over. And I've had to have very painful conversations with clients where I say, look, it doesn't matter how bad you want to make this work. Your spouses, there's nothing in their behavior that demonstrates that they're interested in reconciliation. Mm-hmm. So you've got to find a way to let go. And it's a lot like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of death and dying. Yeah. I see it all the time in my office. I see bargaining, I see sadness, I see anger, I see all those, and then ideally, eventually acceptance, and letting go. And I think that's really hard. It's part of the journey, though. There's times where the delay, that there's a dead body and it's just going to rot and start to smell. And then there's times where the delay helps people process what's going on. Yeah. So I think the best thing you can do as a divorce lawyer is to try to those skills I talked about earlier about how empathy and reading the room and reading another person. Yeah. sometimes what you're doing with your client is helping leverage that and helping them see things, like helping them see, like, you know, okay, this is where they're at. And good divorce lawyers, like we enter that human arena of it. Like I have colleagues who I'll call and I'll say like, yeah, my client's like having a minute with this. Like they're like, yeah, see, my client's like out the door. And I'm like, okay, can you tell your client, like, just don't be quite so big about how out the door they are for a minute, because my client's like getting used to the water still. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, I'll do that. You know, and sometimes we can sort of help people accept what's going on, because sometimes it's just time. It's like grief, you know, like grief. I lost my mom 8 years ago, and for a little while I was just numb, and then for a little while I was sad, and now even 8 years later, like sometimes grief just shows up. Yeah. Like it just shows up. Like I'll be in the store, the grocery store, and I'll see a lady who has hair like she was, and I'll think to myself like, oh, she reminds me, and then for a minute that pain is there again, and I wonder what would happen. I like to think about this sometimes, like what would happen if I went up, because this actually happened to me. I was in the health food store, and there's this lady who looked just like my mom. She was dressed like my mom, and I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like she looks so much like my mom. And I wondered what would happen if I went up to her and I said, excuse me, my mom died after a long battle with cancer, and you look a lot like her. Like, and I just want to give you a hug. And I thought to myself, well, if a woman came up to me and said, I'm sorry, you don't know me and don't think I'm a crazy person, but I had a son and he looked just like you and he died, and can I just hug you? I would hug the shit out of that woman. I would hug her as long as I'd be like, I'll come home, you can cook me dinner if you want. Like, because this is like, we're human. Like, let's just figure this out. You know, these are human experiences. Loss to death, loss to divorce, like betrayal, so human, right? And if we could just create a society or backstops or communities where we support each other in that, you know? And again, it won't be advertising driven. Yeah. Like the revolution will not be televised. You know, like it has to be, and I really want to believe this is coming. Like I think that we have run the limits of consumerism and late capitalism as far as they go. We can't make the cars any faster, they'll take flight. We can't make the houses any bigger, we'll just get lost in them. We can't make the jewelry any more opulent than hundreds of millions of dollars on your fingers. You can't wear multiple watches on one arm. So maybe we've reached the limits and we just go, okay, this is nothing. I'm as miserable as I was, if not more. Now what? And maybe the failure rate of marriage will be the thing that saves marriage. Because maybe it will be the thing that we go, yeah, you know what, we got to do this better because this sucks.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, yeah, I'm just so appreciate your time coming in here today. I think that, you know, there's so much wisdom that you shared. And obviously I think a lot of people would be interested in how do we get divorce rates down? How do we get marital satisfaction up or relational satisfaction up? And I think a lot of the principles that we've talked about today and clarifying kind of the purpose of marriage and even just like the concept of working on yourself and expectations and all this thing. I think a lot of people don't think about these things, and coming away from this podcast, really hope that people start thinking about these things a little bit more. And I think we could set ourselves up for more success. So
yeah, I think almost anything, if we approach it with intentionality, focus, compassion, empathy, there's very few things in life that won't get better if we approach them that way. So I hope that's what happens.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was great to see you. It was great to sit down with you.